Hi guys. Tonight, we step out of the modern world and into a place that does not care whether you are comfortable or not. You push open a heavy wooden door, swollen from years of damp, and cold air spills out as if the building itself exhales. Stone rises around you, pale and dim. Swallowing sound. The floor is already cold through your boots. Somewhere above, the ceiling disappears into darkness. You are standing inside a medieval church in the depth of winter, and in a few hours, you will try to sleep here. You pause just inside the doorway. The smell hits first. Old stone, wax, damp wool, and something faintly organic, like earth that has never fully dried. Your breath fogs instantly. You rub your hands together out of habit, though you already sense it will not help much. This place was not designed for warmth. It was designed for awe, humility, and endurance. And tonight, you get the full experience. Here is the part they do not put in the romantic paintings. You probably will not survive this night comfortably, not even close. People often imagine medieval churches as peaceful refuges, glowing with candlelight and quiet devotion. But in winter, they were closer to giant stone refrigerators. The walls absorbed cold all day and released it slowly through the night. Once you stop moving, the chill begins to work its way inward, layer by layer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where you are listening from, and what time it is where you are right now. Now, dim the lights, and stay right here as the door closes softly behind you. You take a few careful steps forward. Each footfall echoes longer than expected, as if the sound itself is reluctant to move on. This echo was no accident. One well-known historical fact is that medieval churches were deliberately built with vast open interiors and high ceilings to lift sound upward, carrying prayers toward heaven. The problem is that heat rises too. Whatever warmth your body produces immediately drifts away, vanishing into the darkness above. You find a place along the side aisle, near a thick column. The stone is slick with cold. You touch it with your fingertips and pull back quickly. It feels almost wet. Though it is dry, stone holds cold in a way wood never does. Historians still debate whether medieval builders understood just how brutally cold these spaces would become at night, or whether spiritual priorities simply outweighed physical comfort. Either way, the result is the same for you right now. As your eyes adjust, details emerge. The floor is uneven, worn smooth by centuries of feet. In some places, thin layers of dried rushes and straw remain scattered across the stone. This was one small attempt at insulation, and also a way to soak up moisture and smells. A quirky detail from the period is that these rushes were sometimes mixed with herbs like lavender or mint, not for warmth, but to make the space smell less like damp bodies and animals. Tonight, the herbs are long gone, and the cold dominates everything. You shift your weight from one foot to the other. Standing still already hurts. Your toes tingle, then fade toward numbness. You realize quickly that sleeping will not be about comfort. It will be about strategy. Where you sit, how you curl, how you breathe, even how close you allow yourself to be to others. Somewhere behind you, the door creaks again. Another figure enters quietly, stamping their feet once before stopping, just like you did. In winter, churches often served as shelters, especially for travelers, pilgrims, or the very poor. This is not charity in the modern sense. It is obligation, hospitality wrapped tightly around religious duty. Turning someone away into the snow could be a sin. Letting them stay might mean sharing a little warmth, or at least sharing the misery. You lower yourself carefully to the floor. The stone steals heat instantly, even through your clothing. Medieval garments were made of wool and linen, good materials when you are moving, terrible ones when pressed flat against frozen rock. You sit cross-legged for a moment, Then stretch your legs. Then pull them back again. Nothing feels right. This constant shifting is normal. People rarely slept still in places like this. Sleep came in fragments, not in deep, luxurious stretches. You listen. The building has its own sounds. Wind presses against the walls outside, finding gaps around doors and windows. Somewhere high above, wood creaks as beams contract in the cold. Each sound feels amplified, as if the church is awake even when you are meant to rest. There is comfort in knowing the structure still stands. There is also unease in realizing how alone you are inside it. A faint glow appears near the altar. A candle has been lit. Its flame trembles. Thin and brave. Candles provided light, not heat. Another simple fact that surprises many people today: you might feel psychological comfort from its presence, but the warmth never reaches you. Still, you angle your body toward it, instinctively chasing even the illusion of heat. As the minutes stretch, your breathing slows. Inhale, exhale. Each breath blooms white in front of your face, then fades. You begin to understand how prayer and cold became intertwined. When your body is uncomfortable, your mind looks for meaning. Some scholars suggest that enduring cold inside sacred spaces reinforced spiritual discipline, while others argue it was simply unavoidable, given the technology of the time. Either way, discomfort becomes part of the experience. You pull your arms tight against your chest. The stone column at your back is unforgiving, but it blocks a little of the draft. That matters. Small choices like this could mean the difference between a miserable night and a dangerous one. People knew this. They learned quickly. Or they suffered. Your eyes grow heavy. Not because you are warm, but because exhaustion always wins eventually. The cold does not disappear. It simply becomes the background against which sleep flickers in and out. You rest your head against your knees. The candlelight wavers. The echoing space settles into a low, steady hush. This is only the beginning. The night has many hours left, and the cold is patient. You do not fall asleep so much as drift. The stone never stops pressing its message into your body. Cold is not a single sensation here. It arrives in layers. First, your skin tightens. Then your muscles stiffen. Finally, a deeper chill settles somewhere behind the ribs. Quiet and persistent. You shift again, careful not to wake the others nearby. Movement is both relief and risk. Every time you move, you lose what little heat you have trapped. You become aware of the walls. They are massive, ancient, and completely indifferent. Medieval churches were often built from limestone or sandstone quarried nearby. One widely accepted historical fact is that these stones were chosen for durability and symbolism, not insulation. Thick walls meant strength, permanence, and protection from attack. What they did not offer was warmth. Stone absorbs cold slowly and releases it just as slowly, which means the church stays cold long after the sun has gone down and even after it rises again. You press your palm against the floor for a moment, then regret it. The cold feels almost alive, as if it is creeping upward, searching for exposed skin. You tuck your hands into your sleeves. Gloves, if you have them at all, are thin and worn. Medieval gloves were often fingerless or loosely knit, better for work than for sleeping. Once again, clothing that made sense during the day fails you completely at night. A strange quiet settles in. Not silence. Exactly. But a muffled stillness. Snow outside absorbs sound, and thick walls block what little remains. Inside, every noise becomes personal. A cough echoes farther than it should. A sigh feels loud. You hear someone nearby mutter a prayer. Half asleep, half awake. This is not unusual. Churches were places of constant ritual, even at night, even in winter. The rhythm of devotion never fully stopped. There is a curious detail historians still argue over. Some believe that the extreme cold of churches was seen as spiritually beneficial, a way to discipline the body and sharpen the soul. Others suggest this interpretation came later, a kind of retroactive meaning applied to what was simply poor thermal design. Either way, you are not thinking about theology right now. You are thinking about your feet. They ache first, then go numb. You pull them closer, curling your body into a tighter shape. This position is instinctive. Curling reduces exposed surface area, conserving heat. People learn this without words, without diagrams. The body remembers what works. Even so, the floor drains warmth faster than you can make it. Somewhere above, the ceiling disappears into shadow. The height of the nave is impressive, even in low light. That height matters. Warm air rises, and here it rises far beyond reach. A quirky but well-documented detail is that some medieval churches were so tall that birds nested in the rafters year-round. You imagine them now, feathers fluffed, better insulated than you are, perched far above the cold stone floor. The candle near the altar flickers again. Its light stretches and shrinks, shadows breathing along the walls. You watch it because there is nothing else to do. Fire is comforting, even when it offers no heat. There is always a tension here. Fire is dangerous inside sacred spaces. Churches burned easily once flames took hold. Wooden roofs, tapestries, and furnishings could turn a small spark into disaster. Because of this, open fires were rare or forbidden. Fear of fire often outweighed fear of freezing. You listen to the building. It creaks softly as temperatures drop further. Stone contracts. Wood complains. These sounds are slow and deliberate, like the church settling into the night. You realize that the cold will deepen before morning. The lowest temperatures usually arrive just before dawn. That knowledge sits quietly in your mind. Unwelcome, but unavoidable. You think about why anyone would choose this. For some, there was no choice. Travelers caught in snowstorms. Pilgrims with nowhere else to go. The poor seeking shelter where they could. Churches offered safety from the elements, even if they offered no comfort. Being dry, even when freezing, was still better than being wet and freezing outside. Your breathing slows again. You try to relax your jaw, your shoulders. Tension wastes energy. Experienced sleepers in places like this knew that. There is a kind of skill involved, a way of surrendering without giving up. You let your thoughts drift, not toward warmth, but toward stillness. Sleep comes in short waves. You surface often. Each time, the cold greets you as if you have just arrived. There is no gradual adjustment. It is constant, unwavering. The stone remembers everything. You pull your cloak tighter. It smells faintly of smoke and wool. That smell is comforting. It reminds you that you are human, that others have endured this before you. The night stretches on, slow and heavy, and the church holds you in its frozen calm. You begin to understand why anyone would choose to sleep here only after you have been cold for a long time. The question presses into your thoughts as insistently as the stone presses into your hip. Why a church? Why this place? Why not anywhere else? The answer is not simple, and it changes depending on who you imagine yourself to be tonight. For some, sleeping inside a church is not a choice at all. Winter travel in the medieval world was dangerous in ways that are easy to forget now. Roads vanished under snow, landmarks disappeared, inns were scarce, and many closed entirely during the harshest months. When darkness fell early and storms rolled in without warning, a church could be the only solid structure within reach. Thick walls meant shelter from wind. A roof meant snow would not bury you alive. Even frozen stone was safer than open ground. You draw your cloak tighter as you think about that. Dry matters. Even now, wrapped in cold air, you are dry. Outside, wet snow would soak wool and linen, pulling heat from the body at terrifying speed. People of the time knew this well. Even if they did not speak in modern terms about hypothermia, they knew that dampness killed quietly. For others, the reason is faith. Churches were sacred spaces, but they were also central to daily life. In many towns, the church was the largest building, the strongest building, and sometimes the only public building. Sleeping inside its walls placed you close to the holy, close to protection, both physical and spiritual. Some believed that resting beneath a consecrated roof offered safety not just from weather, but from darker forces that were thought to roam the night. There are accounts suggesting that pilgrims deliberately sought out churches to sleep in, even when other shelter was available. Pilgrimage routes often depended on churches opening their doors after dark. A simple floor near the nave might be offered without ceremony. No bed, no fire, just permission to stay. The expectation was gratitude, silence, and departure at dawn. You shift again, easing pressure off one leg. The stone does not soften. It never will. There is also poverty to consider. For the very poor, winter narrowed choices brutally. Wames, if they existed at all, were often colder and less secure than churches. Many peasant houses were built of wood and daub, with gaps that let wind slide straight through. Churches, by contrast, were solid, drafty, yes, but dependable. They stood when smaller buildings failed. If you had nowhere else to go, the church door might be the only one that did not shut completely against you. Some local records hint that church wardens tolerated overnight sleepers during severe weather. Even if rules technically forbade it, enforcement softened when temperatures dropped. Compassion and practicality quietly overruled regulation. The church was meant to care for souls, after all, and sometimes that meant letting bodies survive the night. You glance toward the darker edges of the nave. Shapes lie still there, bundles of cloth, curled forms, people keeping as much space as they can while still staying inside the same pocket of air. No one speaks. This is understood behavior. Talking wastes warmth and invites attention. Respect for the sacred space also demands quiet. An odd detail appears in some parish notes and sermons from later centuries. There were complaints about sleepers leaving behind dirt, lice, and smells. Rushes had to be replaced more often. Floors needed cleaning. These complaints tell you something important. It means sleeping here happened often enough to be noticed, often enough to be a problem, often enough to leave traces. You feel the truth of it in your own body now. Staying warm becomes a negotiation between dignity and survival. You pull your knees closer to your chest, letting your spine curve. This position feels less formal, less respectful perhaps, but far more effective. Medieval ideals of posture do not survive contact with winter stone. It is sometimes suggested that sleeping in churches was encouraged as a form of humility. Cold floors, hard surfaces, shared space, all reminders of human frailty. Yet there is disagreement about whether this was intentional or simply tolerated. Some writings praise discomfort as spiritually cleansing. Others focus entirely on practical necessity. With no hint of symbolic meaning, the reality likely shifts depending on place, time, and circumstance. You rub your hands together slowly, then tuck them under your armpits. This small trick appears again and again in descriptions of cold nights from many periods. The body shelters its own heat. You learn quickly where warmth hides. Another reason people slept here comes to you as you listen to the wind outside. Safety. Churches were respected spaces. Violence inside them was feared, sometimes even forbidden by custom, while theft could happen anywhere. Sleeping near the altar carried a sense of protection. Even those with little respect for law hesitated to cause trouble under a sacred roof. Not always, but often enough to matter. Your breathing settles into a slow rhythm again. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through slightly parted lips. The air feels sharper now, colder. You sense the temperature dropping further, just as the long winter night deepens. You imagine the variety of people who have lain on this same floor: a merchant delayed by snow, a widow with nowhere else to go, a pilgrim sore from days of walking, a local villager locked out by circumstance rather than choice. Each body added heat to the space, however briefly. Each left behind a memory in the stone, if stone can remember anything at all. There is a quiet irony here. Churches were built to draw people upward, toward heaven, toward light. Yet on nights like this, everyone is pressed downward, close to the earth, seeking warmth like animals. Faith does not remove the body. It sits inside it, shivering. Your eyes close for a few moments. You almost drift, then wake again as a sharper draft slips along the floor. You adjust, inching closer to the column behind you. Blocking airflow matters more than comfort. People learn to read buildings the way sailors read wind. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs softly, then stills themselves. Illness was a constant companion in winter. Cold weakened bodies over time, making even small infections dangerous. There is no sense of panic about this, just quiet endurance. This is normal. This is expected. You realize something important. Sleeping in a medieval church during winter was not about rest. It was about getting through the night. Sleep was secondary. Survival came first. Rest arrived only in fragments. Whenever the body could steal a few minutes of unconsciousness between waves of cold, the candle near the altar burns lower. Wax pools and hardens. Light dims but does not disappear. Someone must have tended it recently. Even here. Even now. Routine persists. You open your eyes again and let them linger on the shadows stretching along the walls. This place is not cruel. It is simply honest. It offers shelter, not comfort. Protection, not warmth. And for many, that was enough. You settle back into stillness, accepting what this night is and what it is not. The cold remains, the stone remains, and you remain with them, waiting for sleep to come when it can. The floor becomes the main character of the night. You had noticed it earlier, but now it demands your full attention. Stone presses into you with a steady certainty, as if reminding you that gravity never sleeps, even when you try to. The surface is uneven, shaped by centuries of footsteps, knees, and careful processions. In some places it dips slightly. In others, it rises just enough to irritate a hip or shoulder. There is no flat comfort here, only tolerable angles. You reach down and brush your fingers across what lies between you and the stone. A thin scatter of dried rushes crackles softly. These plant stems were spread deliberately across church floors throughout much of the medieval period. Parish records show regular payments for bundles of rushes, replaced several times a year. Their purpose was simple. They absorbed moisture, reduced slipping, and added the faintest barrier between human bodies and cold stone. Tonight, you understand just how faint that barrier really is. You shift onto one side, then back again. Each movement is careful, slow, economical. Wasting energy feels dangerous, even if you cannot fully explain why. The cold teaches restraint. Your body searches for a position that spreads pressure evenly while keeping as much of you tucked inward as possible. Curling helps, but it strains your neck. Stretching feels better for a moment, then worse as more surface touches the floor. It becomes clear why medieval sleep was rarely long or deep in places like this. Rest happened in pieces. You drift for a few minutes, wake to adjust, then drift again. This pattern shows up in many descriptions of pre-modern sleep, often called segmented sleep by modern researchers. The idea that people once expected to wake during the night is still discussed, though it remains uncertain how universal that experience truly was. What is certain is that floors like this never invited uninterrupted rest. You press your cheek briefly against your sleeve, testing whether fabric might soften the stone. It does not. Wool insulates well against air, but compressed under weight, it loses much of its warmth. Linen does even less. You are reminded that medieval bedding, when it existed, relied heavily on layers and loft, straw mattresses, feather ticks, folded blankets. None of that is available to you here. A faint smell rises as the rushes shift beneath your weight. Dry grass, dust, something faintly sweet and something faintly sour. In some churches, rushes were deliberately mixed with herbs, not only for scent, but because certain plants were believed to discourage pests. There is evidence that basil, lavender, and even mint were scattered this way. Whether they actually helped is unclear, but the intention speaks to constant, low-level battles against dampness, insects, and decay. Your shoulder begins to ache. Stone does not yield. You roll slowly onto your other side, drawing your knees up again. This curled position exposes less of your body to the floor, but it concentrates pressure in fewer places. There is no perfect solution. You accept discomfort as part of the bargain you made when you stayed. Nearby, someone shifts as well. You hear the faint scrape of cloth against stone. Then stillness. These small sounds carry far in the cold air. You become acutely aware of how much space sound occupies here. The vast interior amplifies even quiet movements, making privacy feel fragile. You move more carefully because of it. The floor holds more than cold. It holds history. Beneath you may lie burials, especially if this church is old. In many places, people were interred inside churches for centuries. Nobles, clergy, benefactors. Sometimes entire floors were raised over generations of graves. Sleeping above the dead was not unusual. It was normal, comforting to some, disturbing to others. Tonight, it is simply another fact pressing quietly into your awareness. Some accounts suggest that people believed warmth rose from the earth, making floors slightly warmer than the air. In practice, this only applied to earthen floors or those above active burials where decomposition produced heat. Stone floors, especially those raised and ventilated, offered no such benefit. Still, beliefs like this influenced where people chose to lie. Even a false hope can shape behavior. You pull your cloak tighter beneath your chin. The fabric smells of smoke and lanolin. That smell is grounding. It connects you to fires past, to hearths that existed somewhere else. Sometime earlier, memory becomes a source of warmth when nothing else is available. Time stretches again, without a clock, without a clear sense of hours. You measure the night by bodily sensations. The cold deepens, then steadies, then deepens again. The ache in your hip grows, then dulls. You wonder if that dullness is relief or numbness. You decide not to test it. There is a lesson hidden in this flaw. Medieval life demanded constant negotiation with physical reality. Comfort was not assumed. It was earned, borrowed, or endured without. Floors were for standing, kneeling, working. Sleeping on them was a last resort, but a familiar one. People adapted because they had to. You think briefly about the difference between sacred stone and ordinary stone. The material is the same. The meaning is different. Lying here feels heavier, not just physically, but emotionally. There is an unspoken expectation of reverence, even in sleep. You avoid sprawling. You keep your movements restrained. Respect shapes posture as much as cold does. A slow draft slides along the floor, brushing your ankles. You pull them closer again. Blocking airflow becomes your main concern now. The rushes help slightly by breaking up the movement of air, but they cannot stop it. In some churches, tapestries were hung along walls to reduce drafts and improve acoustics. Whether they significantly improved warmth is uncertain, but they likely helped more than bare stone. This space, tonight, has none. You close your eyes again and focus on breathing. Inhale slowly. Exhale slowly. Your breath fogs, then fades. You imagine each exhale carrying away tension. Even as the cold remains, This mental shift does not warm you, but it makes the discomfort easier to bear. Sleep arrives again, shallow and brief. You dream of softness, of wood instead of stone, of straw that gives under your weight. When you wake, the floor reminds you where you are. There is no anger in this reminder, just fact. The night continues its slow passage. The floor continues to hold you. Between the two, you exist in a narrow space of endurance, learning what it truly meant to rest when rest was never guaranteed. Breathing becomes something you notice, then something you manage. Each inhale pulls air that feels sharper than it should, as if winter has teeth. Each exhale leaves you in a small cloud that hangs for a moment before dissolving. In this place, breath is visible. It marks time. It proves you are still awake, still warm enough to produce vapor. Still here. You try to slow it down. Fast breathing wastes heat. This is not knowledge written in books for you. It is knowledge learned by feeling. When your chest rises too quickly, the cold seems to rush in faster. When you breathe steadily, deliberately, the world feels slightly more manageable. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. The rhythm becomes almost prayerful, even if no words form. The church seems to breathe with you. Cold air sinks along the floor. Warmer air drifts upward, out of reach. High above, darkness swallows what little heat there is. Medieval churches were shaped to lift voices and thoughts upward. But that same design turns the lower level into a basin for cold. You are lying in the coldest part of the building by default. You hear a quiet murmur nearby. Someone whispers words you cannot quite make out. It might be a prayer. It might be habit. In winter nights like this, faith often slipped into repetition, less about belief and more about rhythm. Saying familiar words gave the mind something to hold while the body endured. There is a detail that appears again and again in winter accounts from the past. People describe the sound of breath as comforting. Hearing others breathe meant they were alive. It meant the cold had not yet taken anyone in the night. Silence could be unsettling. You listen now, not just to yourself, but to the faint exhalations around you. A shared rhythm, uneven, human, real. Your nose begins to ache. The tip grows numb, then painful again as sensation flickers. Cold affects the face first. There is nothing you can do but tuck your chin down and breathe through fabric. The air warms slightly as it passes through wool. It is not much, but it is something. Medieval scarves, when worn at all, were often simple strips of cloth. You use your cloak the same way, improvising. As you breathe, you become aware of smell again. Cold sharpens it. Wax from the candle, damp stone, old fabric, human bodies that have not seen hot water in weeks. None of it is overwhelming, but it is constant. Churches absorbed these scents over centuries. In winter, with doors closed and air heavy, they lingered longer. Some believed breath itself carried spiritual weight, exhalations rising like prayers, especially in cold air where they could be seen. This idea appears in sermons and devotional writing, where breath became a visible sign of life offered back to God. Whether people truly felt this connection, or whether it was poetic language layered on discomfort, is hard to say. What you feel now is simpler. Breathing is survival. You notice that when you drift towards sleep, your breathing changes. It becomes shallow, slower. That is when the cold seems to push back hardest. Your body resists full relaxation, as if it knows letting go completely would be dangerous. Sleep arrives, retreats, then arrives again, never settling long. There is a brief moment when you dream that you are somewhere warmer. The dream is thin, almost transparent. You wake quickly, breath-catching, a rush of cold reminding you where you are. These broken dreams were common in harsh conditions. Rest without warmth rarely stays deep. You adjust again, turning slightly so your face is not fully exposed to open air. You angle your body to use the column behind you as a shield. Blocking airflow makes a difference you can feel immediately. Your breath fogs less. The cold becomes less aggressive. People learned to read spaces like this instinctively, choosing where to lie based on drafts and shadows rather than comfort. In the stillness, you become aware of how loud breathing can feel inside your own head. Each inhale sounds amplified. Each exhale echoes faintly. The vastness of the church exaggerates everything. Even your own presence feels larger than it is. This can be calming or unsettling, depending on your state of mind. There are hints in historical writing that winter breathing in churches was associated with illness. Cold air was thought to unbalance the body, allowing sickness to enter through the lungs. While the theory was flawed, the outcome was not entirely wrong. Prolonged cold weakened immune systems. Nights like this took a quiet toll, especially on the old and the already fragile. You think briefly of morning. Not warmth, just light. Light changes things, even when temperature does not. Knowing dawn will come helps. Time is a strange thing here. Without clocks or bells marking hours, the night stretches. Breathing becomes your measure. Each cycle a small unit of endurance. Nearby, someone snores softly for a moment, then stops. The sound is almost comforting. It suggests deeper sleep than you are managing. You wonder how they do it. Perhaps exhaustion has claimed them fully. Perhaps they are simply practiced at this kind of night. You focus again on your own rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. The cloud forms. The cloud fades. There is something oddly beautiful about it. Proof of life appearing and disappearing in the dark. A reminder that warmth exists inside you, even when the world around you offers none. Some nights, people described seeing their breath as reassuring. Other nights, it reminded them how cold it truly was. Tonight, for you, it does both. It is a comfort and a warning at the same time. You tuck your hands closer to your chest, letting your breath warm your fingers slightly as it passes. This small trick appears in many cold weather accounts. People learn to use every part of themselves to conserve heat. Nothing was wasted. As fatigue deepens, your thoughts slow. Breathing becomes automatic again. The effort of staying warm fades into the background. Not because it ends, but because you stop fighting it moment by moment. Acceptance creeps in quietly. The candle burns lower still. Its light barely reaches you now. Shadows stretch and merge. The church feels larger and emptier at the same time. Yet the sound of breath, your own and others, fills the space with something human. You drift again, not fully asleep, not fully awake. Breath carries you forward through the night, one quiet cloud at a time. Light becomes precious now, not because it brings warmth, but because it brings shape to the darkness. Your eyes keep drifting toward the faint glow near the altar, where a candle still burns. Stubborn and small, its flame trembles whenever cold air slips through unseen gaps. You know, even without testing it, that stepping closer would not change how cold you feel. Candles comfort the mind far more than the body. Fire inside churches was always treated with caution. Wooden roofs, beams darkened by centuries of smoke, tapestries hanging along walls. All of it could vanish in moments if flame escaped its place. Because of that, churches relied on candles and oil lamps rather than open fires. They were carefully positioned, carefully watched, and carefully limited. Even in the deepest winter, heat was not the goal. Light was. You shift slightly so the glow falls across your hands. The skin looks pale in this light, almost translucent. Shadows exaggerate the bones beneath. Candlelight has a way of revealing fragility. Faces look sharper. Movements appear slower. The cold makes everything feel more deliberate. There is a quiet tension in this light. It fights the dark, but never wins. Shadows pool along the edges of columns and stretch across the floor like long fingers. You imagine how different this space must look during daytime services. filled with voices and color. At night, in winter, it feels stripped down to essentials: stone, air, flame, breath. You notice how people position themselves relative to the candle. No one crowds it. There is an unspoken understanding that light is shared, not claimed. Getting too close might also mean drawing attention, and attention inside a sacred space carries weight. Respect shapes behavior even when comfort is scarce. There is an old belief, mentioned in various church writings, that light itself had protective power. Darkness was associated with danger, temptation, and unseen threats. A lit candle, even a small one, pushed back more than shadow. Whether people truly believed this in a literal sense, or whether it simply made nights feel safer, is difficult to untangle. What matters now is that you feel steadier knowing it is there. You watch the flame lean, then straighten. Wax softens, pools, then hardens again as drips slide down the candle's side. This slow process mirrors the night itself. Gradual, relentless, unconcerned with your discomfort. You let your eyes follow it because focusing on small movements makes time feel gentler. Cold changes how light behaves. The air feels denser. The glow seems sharper at the edges, as if the flame is cutting into darkness rather than blending with it. You notice tiny flickers of reflected light along the stone floor, caught on uneven patches polished smooth by centuries of use. There is a strange detail found in some church accounts. In extreme cold, candles sometimes burned differently, their flames shorter, their wax harder. People notice this, even if they did not understand the physics behind it. Cold stiffened everything, even fire. Watching it struggle added to the sense that winter reached into all things. You pull your cloak tighter again, then stop moving. Movement stirs air, and stirred air feels colder. Stillness becomes a skill. The body learns to settle into itself, conserving heat, minimizing exposure. You hold your hands close, fingers tucked, watching their shadows dance faintly against the floor. A memory surfaces of standing near a fireplace. Long ago, perhaps in another life. The contrast feels almost painful. Fire as warmth, fire as comfort. Here, fire is fragile, constrained, almost symbolic. It exists, but only barely, and only where allowed. You think about the people tasked with tending these lights. Sacristans, clergy, caretakers. In winter, keeping candles lit through the night required effort and attention. Wax was expensive. Oil was valuable. Light was not taken for granted. Allowing a candle to burn while people slept nearby was itself a quiet act of care. Some sources suggest that certain churches dimmed lights deliberately at night to discourage lingering. Darkness pushed people to rest and leave early. Others kept small lights burning as a sign of welcome or vigilance. Practices varied widely. Standing here, or rather lying here, you experience the result rather than the intention. The flame flutters again, and for a moment it dims so much you think it will go out. Your chest tightens instinctively. Losing the light would make the cold feel heavier. Then the flame steadies, small but alive. You exhale slowly, realizing you had been holding your breath. Light also changes how cold feels psychologically. In darkness, the cold seems more aggressive, more immediate. In light, even weak light, it feels slightly more distant. You cling to that illusion without shame. Survival often depends on illusions that make hardship bearable. Nearby, someone shifts and pulls their cloak over their head, blocking out light entirely. For them, darkness may be easier. Everyone finds their own way through the night. There is no single right method, only what works well enough. You let your gaze drift again. Stone arches rise out of shadow, their curves barely visible. Candlelight reveals only fragments, never the whole. This partial vision encourages imagination. You fill in shapes with memory and guesswork. The church becomes larger than it is, older than it already feels. Cold creeps back into your awareness. Watching the flame does not stop it. Your feet ache again, then settle into numbness. You flex your toes inside your shoes, just enough to remind yourself they are still there. Shoes in this period offered little insulation. Leather stiffened in cold, becoming almost rigid. Removing them would expose skin, so you keep them on. Accepting the discomfort, you return your attention to the candle, to the slow drip of wax, to the soft hiss barely audible in the stillness. This sound, tiny as it is, joins the chorus of breath and distant wind. The church is never silent. It simply speaks softly. There is a quiet irony in all this. Light, meant to guide and inspire, becomes a tool for endurance. You are not lifted by it. You are steadied by it. That is enough. As fatigue deepens, your eyelids grow heavier. The flame blurs slightly, then sharpens again as you blink. You let it drift in and out of focus. The way sleep drifts in and out of reach. There is no hurry. The night will take as long as it takes. You finally turn your face away from the light, letting darkness fill your vision. The candle remains in your awareness, even when you are not looking at it. A small point of certainty in a cold, shifting world. With that, you settle again, breathing slowly, body curled inward. Light behind you, darkness ahead. The flame keeps burning, quietly, while the night moves forward without pause. Once your body stops moving, clothing reveals its true purpose and its limits. During the day, wool and linen serve you well enough. They breathe. They protect against wind when you walk. They hold warmth when muscles are active. But here, pressed into stone, still and waiting, those same layers feel thin, almost symbolic. You become aware of every seam, every fold, every place where fabric pulls tight and loses its ability to trap air. Your tunic bunches slightly at the waist. You smooth it down, then regret disturbing the small pocket of warmth you had built. Wool insulates best when it holds air, flattened beneath your weight. It becomes little more than cloth. Linen beneath it offers even less resistance to cold. It was valued for cleanliness and comfort in warmer seasons, not for winter nights spent on stone floors. You tug your cloak closer around your shoulders. Cloaks were versatile garments, used for travel, work, and rest. They were blankets before blankets were common. Yet even this feels insufficient. The fabric is heavy, but weight does not equal warmth. Cold seeps through steadily, indifferent to effort. There is a detail often overlooked in modern imagination. Medieval clothing was rarely tailored for sleeping. People slept in what they wore, or in less. Night garments as a separate category were rare outside wealthy households. Most people simply lay down in their clothes, perhaps loosening a belt or removing shoes if conditions allowed. Tonight, you keep everything on. Every layer matters. Your fingers find the edge of your sleeve and pull it down over your hand. Fingerless gloves or mittens were common, allowing work during the day. But at night they leave skin exposed. You curl your hands inward, tucking them against your chest. The body becomes its own shelter, folding in on itself. You notice how quickly fabric grows cold once you stop touching it. The cloak against your back feels almost as cold as the stone. Cold migrates. It spreads quietly. There is no line where warmth ends and chill begins. The transition is gradual, persistent, and exhausting. In some accounts from colder regions, people layered multiple tunics or wore padded garments in winter. Yet inside churches, rules of decorum sometimes discouraged overly bulky dress, especially near the altar. How strictly this was enforced varied widely. On nights like this, practicality usually won. No one questions extra layers when breath fogs the air. Still, clothing alone cannot solve the problem. You become aware of gaps. At the neck, at the wrists, at the ankles. Each opening invites cold. You adjust, tuck, overlap fabric where you can. These small adjustments become rituals, repeated each time you wake. There is a strange comfort in the familiarity of this struggle. Generations before you learned the same lessons. How to angle fabric, how to avoid drafts, how to recognize when movement helps and when it hurts. This knowledge passed quietly, through experience rather than instruction. You think briefly about wealth. Those with means slept on beds, raised off the ground, stuffed with straw or feathers. Elevation alone made a difference. Cold air pooled along floors. Being lifted even a little mattered. Here, you are at the coldest level possible. Social class is measured in inches tonight. Some clergy owned fur-lined garments, worn during services in winter. Fur was one of the few materials that truly trapped heat when still. Its use varied by region and status. In some places it was common, in others it was restricted or frowned upon. You imagine how different this night would feel with fur against your skin. Then you let the thought go. It does not help. Your legs begin to ache again. Not from pressure this time, but from cold settling deep into muscle. You flex them slowly, careful not to disturb those around you. Movement brings a brief rush of warmth, then fades. It is tempting to keep moving, but you know that would only lead to exhaustion. Balance is everything. You hear fabric rustle nearby. Someone else is making the same calculations. Adjusting, pulling cloth closer. These sounds repeat softly throughout the night. A shared language of survival. Spoken without words. There is a belief recorded in some regions that sleeping fully clothed prevented illness by keeping evil airs away from the skin. While the reasoning was flawed, the habit itself had merit. Exposed skin loses heat rapidly. Covering it mattered. Regardless of belief. Your face remains the hardest part to protect. You pull the edge of your cloak up, covering your mouth and nose partially. Breathing through fabric warms the air slightly before it reaches your lungs. It also dampens sound. The world grows quieter inside this small cocoon. You notice how smells change when trapped in cloth. Wool carries the scent of sheep, smoke, and past labor. It is earthy and familiar. That familiarity grounds you. It reminds you of workdays, of movement, of life beyond this cold stillness. Sleep comes again. Briefly, in your half-dream, you feel wrapped, held. When you wake, the illusion fades. But the memory lingers just enough to soften the next wave of cold. You adjust your cloak again. Then stop. Too much movement invites chill. You settle into a position that is not comfortable, but acceptable. That word becomes important. Acceptable. Not good. Not pleasant. Just enough. The night presses on. Clothing does what it can. Your body does the rest. Between them, you endure. Your body begins to teach you things your mind never would. How to curl without cramping. How to tuck limbs inward until you resemble something smaller, denser, more efficient. Sleep positions here are not chosen for comfort. They are chosen for survival. You learn quickly that spreading out is a mistake. Every inch exposed to the air is another place for cold to settle. You draw your knees toward your chest again, wrapping your arms around them. This shape feels instinctive, almost ancient. It protects the core. It limits airflow across your torso. It keeps your hands close to warmth. You notice that others around you are doing the same. Each body folded inward in its own variation of the same idea. The church floor becomes a quiet landscape of curled forms. When you try to stretch out, even briefly, the cold rushes in immediately. Your legs feel heavier. Your lower back stiffens. The stone seems to pull heat from you faster when more of you touches it. You retreat back into yourself without hesitation. The lesson is clear. People sleeping like this learn to shift slowly, almost imperceptibly. A knee moves a few inches. A shoulder rolls just enough to relieve pressure. Big movements are costly. They break the fragile balance you have built. They stir air. They waste energy. You adopt this careful economy without thinking about it anymore. There is evidence in old medical writing that curled sleeping positions were thought to conserve vital heat. While the theory behind it was framed differently, the observation was accurate. Bodies that held themselves tight lost warmth more slowly. This was not about comfort. It was about staying alive through the night. You tuck your chin down toward your chest. This protects your throat and reduces the amount of cold air reaching your face. Breathing becomes warmer, quieter. You feel your shoulders relax slightly as your posture settles into something sustainable. The body adapts faster than the mind. Some sleepers lie on their sides, knees drawn up, arms folded. Others sit upright against columns, cloaks wrapped tightly, heads bowed. Sitting reduces contact with the floor but strains muscles over time. Lying down spreads pressure but exposes more of the body. There is no perfect answer. Each person chooses what hurts less. You test sitting for a moment, leaning your back against the column. The stone is unforgiving, but it blocks drafts. Your spine presses into the cold surface, sending a chill upward. After a few minutes, your back begins to ache. You slide down again, returning to the floor, curling once more. Even bad options have rankings. You notice how sleep comes differently in each position. When curled tightly, you drift faster, but wake sooner as pressure builds. When sitting, you stay awake longer, but feel less cold for a time. The night becomes a series of small experiments, each teaching you something new. In the half-light, you see someone nearby wrapped almost completely in their cloak, face hidden, body barely moving. They looked like a bundle of fabric rather than a person. This was common. Disappearing into cloth reduced heat loss and reduced awareness of discomfort. Out of sight, out of mind, even from yourself. There is an odd detail recorded in a few winter accounts. Some people slept with their knees drawn so tightly that circulation slowed, leading to numbness that made sleep easier. Pain fades when sensation fades. This was risky, but desperation often made people accept the trade. Tonight, you hover on the edge of that numbness, unsure whether it is relief or warning. You flex your fingers slowly inside your sleeves. They respond, stiff but present. Good enough. You keep them tucked close again. You have learned where to compromise and where not to. Your breathing settles into a rhythm that matches your posture. Shorter breaths, slower pace. The body becomes compact, contained. Even your thoughts seem to curl inward, losing their edges. There is a quiet dignity in this adaptation. Medieval life demanded constant adjustment to environment. People did not expect the world to change for them. They changed themselves instead. Sleeping positions were not personal preferences. They were responses. You become aware of how the floor slopes slightly beneath you, a small incline, barely noticeable when standing. Now matters. Cold air flows downward, pooling in lower areas. You shift just a little uphill, seeking a place where air feels less sharp. This instinct appears again and again in descriptions of winter shelter. People learn to read terrain indoors as well as out. Some nights, families slept together on floors like this. Bodies pressed close. Shared warmth mattered. Here, strangers maintain distance out of respect, but still cluster loosely. The presence of others alters airflow and temperature in subtle ways. You feel it when someone nearby shifts. A brief change in draft, a momentary warmth. You pull your cloak tighter beneath your knees, adding an extra layer between skin and stone. The fabric bunches awkwardly, but it helps. Improvisation becomes second nature. There are no instructions. You invent solutions as you go. Your neck begins to protest. You roll your head slightly, trying to find a position that does not strain muscles. Without a pillow, alignment is guesswork. You settle for acceptable discomfort. Again, sleep arrives in fragments. You dream of walking, of movement, of warmth generated by effort. When you wake, the stillness feels heavier. Movement is warmth. Stillness is cold. Yet stillness is also rest. You balance between the two. There is a belief hinted at in some devotional writing that curling the body inward mirrored spiritual humility, bowed posture, folded form, submission. Whether people truly thought this as they slept is uncertain. What you know is simpler. This shape keeps you warmer. You become aware of how time passes differently in this posture. Minutes blur, sensations dull. The night stretches, but you no longer measure it actively. You exist in a loop of breath, pressure, and cold. Nearby, someone groans softly in their sleep, then falls quiet again. Their body likely shifted into an awkward position. It happens to you as well. Each time, waking is sharp and unpleasant. Returning to sleep takes effort. You adjust once more, curling tighter, drawing everything inward. This is as small as you can make yourself, as efficient, as protected. The church remains vast around you, but your world has shrunk to the space your body occupies. Stone, cloth, breath, that is enough for now. Sound replaces comfort as the night deepens. When warmth fails you, your senses sharpen instead. You begin to hear everything, not loudly, but clearly. The church is never silent. Even when no one speaks, it breathes, shifts, and settles around you, and your mind latches onto these sounds as proof that time is still moving. Wind finds its way in first. It slips through gaps you cannot see, sliding along stone and wood, changing pitch as it passes arches and doorways. Sometimes it sounds like a low sigh, sometimes like a distant moan. You tell yourself it is only air moving, nothing more, but the sound still crawls along your nerves. In the dark, unfamiliar noises grow larger. Somewhere high above, timber creaks. The roof responds to falling temperatures, beams contracting slightly, joints complaining under centuries of weight. These are slow sounds, stretched out, almost thoughtful. They arrive without warning, then fade. Each one reminds you how old this building is, how much weather it has endured. Closer to the floor, smaller noises take over. Cloth brushing stone, a foot shifting, someone clearing their throat softly, then stopping as if embarrassed by the sound. These noises feel intimate, personal. You imagine each one coming from a body just as cold and uncomfortable as your own. There is comfort in this shared soundscape. Hearing others nearby means you are not alone. It means the cold has not emptied the space of life. In some winter accounts, people described silence as more frightening than noise. Silence suggested abandonment. Sound meant presence. You listen for breathing again. Soft, uneven, sometimes interrupted by a cough or a sigh. Breathing becomes a chorus, uncoordinated but steady. You match your own rhythm to it without realizing. There is something calming about aligning yourself with others, even strangers. Then there are the bells. Not close, not loud, distant bells, marking hours somewhere beyond these walls, perhaps from another church, perhaps from a tower you cannot see. The sound arrives muted by snow and distance, stretched thin by cold air. Bells were timekeepers in the medieval world. They structured days and nights, calling people to prayer, to work, to rest. Hearing them now gives the night shape. You do not know which hour it marks. Midnight, or later. Time feels loose here. Still, the sound anchors you. It tells you the world outside still exists. It tells you morning will eventually come. There is an odd detail preserved in some writings about winter nights. People often misjudge sound in cold air, thinking noises were closer or farther than they really were. Cold carries sound differently. A bell might feel close enough to touch, then fade into nothing. This distortion plays tricks on the mind, especially when tired. You shift slightly, careful not to scrape the floor. Even that small sound feels loud. You pause, listening to see if anyone reacts. No one does. Everyone is absorbed in their own endurance. A sudden sharp noise makes you flinch. A piece of stone falls somewhere in the darkness, perhaps dislodged by temperature change. It skitters across the floor, then stops. Your heart speeds briefly. You breathe slowly until it settles again. Moments like this remind you how alert the body stays, even in exhaustion. Animals add their own layer to the soundscape. A mouse scurries somewhere along the wall. You hear the faint scratch of claws, the quick pause, then movement again. Churches offered shelter to animals as well as people. Grain stores nearby. Warmth from bodies. Hidden corners. Mice were constant companions, whether welcomed or not. You imagine them moving freely while you lie still, constrained by cold and decorum. The thought is oddly comforting. Life continues in small, ordinary ways. Far above, you hear a flutter, perhaps a bird shifting in the rafters. Some birds nested inside churches year-round. Taking advantage of height and relative safety, their presence was noted often enough to become accepted. Tonight, they are just another quiet sound, barely there. The human mind seeks patterns, especially in discomfort. You begin to anticipate sounds. Wind first, then wood, then breath, then perhaps a bell. This anticipation makes the night feel less chaotic. Predictability soothes. At times, the sound of your own body feels intrusive. A stomach growl, a joint popping softly as you adjust. You freeze after each noise, listening for reaction. None comes. Everyone is too busy surviving their own night to notice yours. There is a reason sound mattered so much in these spaces. Vision is limited. Touch is unpleasant. Sound becomes the primary sense connecting you to the world. You listen not just for information, but for reassurance. Some people whispered prayers aloud at night, believing sound itself carried power. Others avoided speech entirely, fearing it would disturb the sacred atmosphere. Practices varied, but quiet dominated. When words were spoken, they were few and deliberate. You consider speaking yourself, just to hear your own voice. You decide against it. Silence feels safer, less exposure, less effort. The cold deepens again. You hear it in the way the building responds. Sounds grow sharper, more brittle. Wood complains more often. Stone seems to click faintly as it contracts. The church is adjusting, just as you are. You tuck your head closer to your knees, reducing how much you hear. Sound changes when muffled by cloth. It becomes softer, more distant. You create a small private space inside the larger one, defined by fabric and breath. In this cocoon, the sounds blend together. Wind becomes background. Breathing becomes steady. The occasional creak no longer startles you. Familiarity dulls fear. You drift again, not fully asleep, but suspended. Sounds pull you back when you slip too far. A cough, a bell, a sudden draft. Each one reminds you to remain, to endure. There is a strange intimacy in sharing sound without sight. You know others are there, but you do not see them. You hear their presence instead. It creates a quiet bond, unspoken and temporary. As the night stretches on, sound becomes less something you notice and more something you exist within. It wraps around you, filling the cold space where comfort might otherwise be. You breathe, you listen, you wait, and the night continues. One sound at a time. Cold air never stays still in a place like this. Even when everything looks calm, even when no one moves, you can feel it sliding along invisible paths. Drafts become the quiet architects of your discomfort. They creep in through doors that never quite seal. through windows set high in stone, through cracks formed by centuries of settling and repair. The church was built to welcome light and sound. Air followed naturally. You notice it first around your ankles. A thin ribbon of cold slips across the floor, finds skin through gaps in fabric, then moves on. It feels deliberate, as if the building itself is testing you. You shift your feet closer to your body, then angle yourself slightly to reduce exposure. Small adjustments make noticeable differences. You learn to respect airflow the way sailors respect wind. High ceilings worsen everything. Warm air rises and stays there, far above where anyone sleeps. Down here, near the stone floor, cold collects and lingers. This is not accidental. Churches were designed vertically, drawing the eye upward, lifting voices toward heaven. Comfort was never part of the plan. The result is a space where cold settles naturally at human level. You glance toward the door, imagining the thin line of air slipping beneath it, even closed, even barred. Doors in this period rarely fit tightly. Wood warped with moisture and age. Iron fittings left gaps. Each opening became a quiet invitation for winter to enter. In summer, these drafts brought relief. In winter, they became enemies. Some churches tried to manage airflow with heavy curtains or tapestries hung along walls and near doors. These softened drafts and improved acoustics. Whether they made a significant difference in warmth is uncertain, but even small barriers mattered. Tonight, the walls are bare. Stone offers no resistance. You pull your cloak tighter again, then realize that fabric flaps slightly when air moves beneath it. You tuck the edges under your body, anchoring them. This reduces movement and keeps drafts from reaching your skin. You feel the improvement almost immediately. Learning how to anchor warmth becomes second nature. You listen for drafts as much as you feel them. A faint whistle, a low sigh, a subtle change in the way candlelight flickers. These signals tell you where air is moving. You shift away from them instinctively. Over time, you begin to map the invisible currents inside the church. There is a strange awareness that comes with this. You become attuned to the building itself, not just as shelter, but as an active participant in the night. Stone channels air. Columns redirect it. Arches create pockets where cold gathers. Sleeping here turns you into a quiet observer of architecture at work. You think about how people once chose sleeping spots deliberately, not near doors, not beneath windows, not in open aisles where air could flow freely. Columns and corners offered protection. So did piles of stored objects, furniture, or screens when available. Tonight, your position beside a column proves its value again and again. A sudden stronger draft slides along the floor, sharper than the others. You stiffen, then relax as it passes. Somewhere outside, wind has shifted. Snow may be falling harder now. Weather communicates with the interior through air long before it announces itself visually. You pull your chin lower, reducing exposure around your neck. That gap is dangerous. Cold finds it easily. You feel it bite, then retreat as fabric settles back into place. Each exposed patch of skin becomes a vulnerability. In winter, sermons and writings, cold air was sometimes described as a trial, something to be endured patiently. The language was spiritual, but the experience was physical. Cold drafts were unavoidable. They shaped how people moved, sat, slept, and prayed. Even devotion had to bend to airflow. You begin to understand why people layered rushes more thickly in winter, or piled cloaks and sacks along walls. Blocking air mattered more than insulating surfaces alone. Still, air feels warmer, even when temperature remains low. This is a lesson learned by feeling rather than measurement. Your breathing changes again as cold brushes your face. Shorter inhales, slower exhales. You tuck your mouth behind fabric. The sound of your breath softens. The cold feels less aggressive when filtered. There is a moment when you consider moving to another spot entirely, Perhaps a corner, perhaps closer to others. Then you weigh the cost. Standing would expose you fully. Moving would stir air and break what warmth you have built. You stay where you are. Endurance often means resisting the urge to improve things. Nearby, someone shifts position and inadvertently opens a small channel for air. You feel the change immediately. A brief wave of cold passes over you. You wait for it to settle. It does. The building exhales again. You think about how little control people had over indoor climate. No glass windows sealed tight. No insulation hidden in walls. No concept of heat retention beyond experience and tradition. Buildings breathed with the seasons. People adapted or suffered. The night deepens. Drafts grow colder as outside temperatures drop. This is the hardest part of the night. Just before dawn, you sense it without knowing the hour. The cold feels heavier, more insistent. Air seems to cut more sharply. You draw everything inward again. Knees tight, arms wrapped, cloak anchored, breath steady. This posture becomes familiar, almost comforting in its repetition. You know what to do now. The building has taught you. For a long while, you do nothing but listen and feel. Drafts come and go. You adjust slightly when needed. Then hold still. Time stretches. Discomfort becomes background rather than focus. Eventually, exhaustion dulls sensation. The cold does not leave, but it loses its sharpness. You drift in and out of shallow rest, guided by breath and sound, protected as much as possible from the moving air. The church continues to breathe around you, slow and ancient. Cold flows where it will. You remain, curled beside stone, enduring the quiet conversation between building and winter. At some point in the night, you become aware of how close other bodies are to yours. Not touching. Not quite. But near enough that the air between you feels different. Slightly warmer. Slightly heavier. It is subtle. Easy to miss if you're not paying attention. But once you notice it, you understand why people drifted closer together as the hours wore on. Warmth multiplies when shared. One body alone loses heat quickly. Two bodies near each other slow that loss. This is not sentiment. It is physics learned through hardship. In winter, proximity becomes a quiet strategy. No one announces it. No one explains it. People simply shift, inch by inch, until the cold feels a little less sharp. You hesitate at first. There are rules here. Even at night, personal space still matters. Modesty still exists. Inside a church, boundaries feel heavier, more watched. Even when no one is watching, you do not reach out. You do not lean openly. You simply allow yourself to remain where you are, close enough that shared air lingers. Someone nearby adjusts their position. You feel a brief brush of warmer air against your arm. Then it fades. The difference is small, but noticeable. You tuck your elbow closer to your side, preserving it. The body remembers warmth instantly. In many medieval communities, sleeping close together was common, even expected. Families shared beds. Travelers slept shoulder to shoulder in inns. Space was precious. Privacy was rare. In that context, lying near strangers during winter was less shocking than it might feel now. Survival redefined comfort zones. Still, inside a church, everything is quieter. Movement is restrained. Contact, if it happens, is accidental and brief. A knee touches a knee, then pulls away. A cloak overlaps for a moment, then separates. These small moments pass without comment. There are hints in old writings that people believed warmth itself could pass from body to body, almost like a substance. While the explanation was vague, the observation was accurate. Heat radiates. Shared space matters. On nights like this, it could mean the difference between numb misery and something bearable. You notice that the cold feels slightly less aggressive on the side facing others. The side exposed to open air still aches. This asymmetry becomes part of your awareness. You angle yourself subtly, favoring the warmth. It feels practical, not rude. Nearby, someone coughs softly, then stills themselves. Illness spreads more easily in close quarters. But cold weakens bodies regardless. People wade risks constantly without naming them. Tonight, warmth wins. You think briefly about how monks slept in communal dormitories, often unheated, bodies lined up in rows. Shared presence provided some comfort, even when individual beds were narrow and hard. Sleeping alone was not always the norm. Solitude was a luxury. In this church, the arrangement is informal, but the effect is similar. Bodies create small pockets of warmer air. You inhabit one of these pockets now. It is fragile. A shift here or there can break it. You try to remain still. Breathing sounds blend. The rhythm near you changes slightly as others drift into shallow sleep. You feel less isolated listening to it. Cold feels more manageable when you are not facing it alone. There is a quiet trust involved in this closeness. You trust that others will not move suddenly, that they will respect boundaries, that they will not disturb the fragile balance everyone is maintaining. This trust is unspoken, but strong. You think about how winter forced cooperation in countless small ways. Sharing space, sharing fire when it existed, sharing food when supplies were low, even sharing misery had value. It reminded people they were not alone. Your shoulder relaxes slightly as warmth from nearby lingers. Muscles unclench a little. The relief is minor, but real. It encourages stillness. Stillness preserves warmth. Everything connects. There is an odd intimacy in this. You do not know the names of the people near you. You may never see them again. Yet for this night, you are linked by cold and breath and proximity. It feels temporary and complete at the same time. You recall stories of people sleeping in barns, in halls, in pilgrim shelters. Bodies packed close to survive winter nights. Churches fit into this pattern during extreme weather. Sacred space became shelter space. Ritual yielded to necessity. Some church authorities worried about propriety, about mixed company sleeping too near each other. Rules were written. Sermons were given. Yet winter softened enforcement. Survival demanded flexibility. Even morality bent slightly under freezing temperatures. You feel someone shift closer. Just a little. Their cloak brushes yours. The fabric is rough, worn thin. You do not move away. The added warmth is welcome. You adjust your own cloak to avoid direct contact, maintaining a respectful distance while still sharing space. Your breathing deepens. The shared warmth makes it easier to relax. Sleep arrives more readily now. Though it remains shallow, dreams come in brief flashes, then dissolve. Each time you wake, the cold returns, but less sharply than before. You sense that others have found similar arrangements. The church floor has subtly reorganized itself. No longer evenly spaced figures, but loose clusters, shaped by drafts and warmth. This happens without discussion, guided by instinct. There is a lesson here that medieval life taught repeatedly. Individual endurance matters, but collective endurance matters more. Winter was not faced alone if it could be helped. Community, even temporary, made hardship survivable. You rest your head against your knees again, feeling the warmth held there linger longer now. Your fingers remain tucked, less stiff than before. It is not comfort, but it is improvement. The night continues its slow passage. Cold still dominates the space, but it no longer feels absolute. Bodies interrupt it. Breath disrupts it. Human presence changes the environment. Even in small ways. You drift again, held in place by exhaustion and shared warmth. The church remains vast and cold, but within it, you have found a fragile pocket of relief. For now, that is enough. You become aware of a new presence long before you see it clearly. A shift in smell, a heavier sound of movement, a faint scrape that does not belong to cloth or stone. Animals, it turns out, do not always respect the boundaries humans imagine, even inside sacred walls. Somewhere near the edge of the nave, something settles with a soft thump. You open your eyes slightly, letting them adjust. In the dim light, a rounded shape resolves itself. A sheep, perhaps, or a goat, tethered loosely or simply accustomed to wandering where warmth gathers. In many medieval churches, animals were not rare intruders. They were part of daily life, even in places meant for worship. Churches served multiple roles in winter. They were houses of prayer. Yes, but also shelters in storms, storage spaces, and gathering points. In rural areas especially, animals were sometimes brought inside during extreme cold, either deliberately or out of necessity. Livestock represented survival. Letting them freeze outside was unthinkable. You notice the smell first. Earthy, musky, alive. It cuts through the damp stone scent and settles into the air. It is not pleasant, but it is not entirely unwelcome either. It smells like warmth, like breath and body heat and movement. The presence of an animal changes the atmosphere instantly. The sound comes next. A quiet shuffle, a low exhale, the faint rustle of straw as hooves adjust position. These sounds are heavier than human ones. Slower, more deliberate. They ground you. You feel less alone listening to them. Animals radiate heat differently than people. Their bodies are thicker, insulated with wool or hide. Even at a short distance, you feel the difference. The air nearby seems less sharp. You inch slightly in that direction without fully committing. Too close might draw attention. Too far wastes the opportunity. There are records from various regions describing animals kept inside churches during winter. Often reluctantly, sometimes openly, clergy complained about damage, dirt, and noise. Villagers argued necessity. Survival blurred the lines between sacred and practical. In cold months, ideals bent. You imagine the debates that must have taken place. Sacred space versus living bodies. Cleanliness versus warmth. Order versus survival. Tonight, the argument is settled by temperature alone. Cold wins. The animal stays. You adjust your position so the animal is upwind of you, blocking drafts rather than inviting them. Instinct guides the choice. People learned to position themselves near animals, not just for warmth, but for airflow control. A large body disrupts cold currents, creating calmer pockets of air. The animal shifts again, closer this time. Its presence is unmistakable now. You hear a soft grunt, then stillness. Perhaps it has settled to rest as well. Animals sleep deeply in cold, conserving energy. Their stillness feels reassuring. You think briefly about hygiene. Fleas, lice, dirt. These were constant concerns. But secondary in winter. Cold itself killed pests slowly. Warmth mattered more than cleanliness when the night threatened to take fingers and toes. There is an odd comfort in the normalcy of this arrangement. Medieval life did not separate humans and animals as strictly as later centuries would. They shared space, labor, and warmth. Sleeping near livestock was not ideal, but it was familiar. You listen to the animal breathe. Slow, steady, confident. It does not seem worried about the cold. Its body is built for this. Thick wool traps air effortlessly. You envy it without resentment. This is simply how the world is divided. Some people believed animals brought protective qualities into spaces they occupied. Their presence was thought to ward off spirits or bring good fortune. Whether that belief extended into churches is unclear. What is clear is that their warmth was appreciated. You feel your own breathing slow further, unconsciously matching the rhythm nearby. There is something calming about it, The animal is not restless. It is not struggling. It simply exists. Warm and solid, indifferent to stone and draught. A faint warmth reaches your side now. It is subtle, but undeniable. You pull your cloak tighter, trapping it. The difference is immediate. Your muscles relax slightly. Your shoulders drop. This small improvement feels significant after hours of cold. You think about the irony. A church, meant to elevate the spirit, offers relief through something so earthly. Wool, flesh, breath. Survival has a way of stripping meaning down to basics. There are stories from later centuries criticizing these practices, portraying them as signs of ignorance or disrespect. But those stories often come from warmer times, written by people who slept in beds and woke with fingers intact. Context matters. You shift carefully, mindful not to disturb the animal. It snorts softly, then resettles. No alarm. No protest. It accepts your presence as easily as you accept its. Mutual tolerance becomes another quiet agreement of the night. The smell grows stronger as the air cools further. You wrinkle your nose, then stop. Resistance feels pointless. Instead, you breathe slowly through fabric, letting the scent fade into background. Adaptation is constant here. The mind learns what to ignore. Sleep comes more easily now. Not deeply, but with fewer interruptions. The cold still presses in, but its edge is dulled. Your hands ache less. Your feet remain numb, but not painfully so. You accept this improvement gratefully. You drift into a shallow dream where warmth is heavy and close. When you wake, the animal is still there. Its presence anchors you. You are not imagining the change. Outside, the wind shifts again. Inside, the air barely moves near the animal. You have found a small advantage, earned not through effort, but through awareness. The church remains cold. Stone remains unforgiving. But within this vast, sacred space, life clusters where it can. Humans and animals share breath and heat, bound by winter more than belief. You curl slightly closer. Careful. Respectful. The animal exhales again. You follow. The night continues. But it feels less hostile now. Not because the cold has left, but because you have learned how to live alongside it. Warmth always carries a shadow here, even as you cling to it. Part of you remains cautious, alert to danger. Fire is the great contradiction of winter nights in a medieval church. It promises relief, comfort, even life itself. And yet, it is feared almost as much as the cold. Perhaps more. You glance again toward the candle near the altar. Its flame looks harmless, almost fragile, but you know better. Everyone here does. Churches burned easily. Stone walls survived, but everything else did not. Roofs of timber, beams blackened by years of smoke, painted wood, cloth hangings. A single mistake could erase centuries in one night. This knowledge hangs quietly in the air, shaping behavior. No one brings a torch inside. No one lights extra candles without reason. Even the animal nearby was likely guided away from open flame. Survival requires restraint as much as warmth. You think about how strange this balance is. Outside, fire is life. A hearth means safety. A flame means food. Dry clothes. A place to gather. Inside the church, fire becomes dangerous. Something to be controlled, minimized, watched constantly. The same element that saves you outdoors can destroy you here. There are accounts of churches burning during winter, often during services or festivals when candles were numerous. Flames climbed beams before anyone could stop them. Roofs collapsed. Bells fell. Stone remained. But everything human was lost. Stories like these travelled far, passed from village to village, reinforcing caution. You imagine what it would feel like if someone tried to light a small fire here now. The warmth would be immediate, tempting, irresistibly, and terrifying. Smoke would gather under the ceiling, invisible at first. Then, thick, panic would follow. There would be nowhere to go quickly. Narrow doors, crowded space, stone walls that trap heat and flame alike. So instead, people choose cold. They choose endurance. Freezing is slow, predictable. Fire is sudden and final. This calculation happens without words, but it shapes the night. You tuck your hands closer to your chest again, feeling the animal's warmth linger. This is acceptable warmth, safe warmth, fireless warmth. It does not threaten the building. It does not invite disaster. The candle flickers again. Someone must be tending it, trimming the wick, making sure wax does not drip too far. That person carries responsibility heavier than the flame itself. A small light requires constant vigilance. Letting it burn unattended would be careless, dangerous. You think about the rules that governed light in sacred spaces. Candles were placed deliberately. Oil lamps were hung at measured distances, even during winter, when darkness lasted long hours. Restraint mattered. Light was rationed not only because it cost money, but because it carried risk. Cold pushes people toward fire instinctively. Fear pulls them back. Living between those impulses becomes normal in places like this. You learn to tolerate discomfort rather than gamble with catastrophe. Your mind drifts briefly to images of hearths, of flames licking stone, of hands held out to warmth. The contrast is sharp. You swallow, then let the thought go. Wanting what you cannot have wastes energy. Nearby, someone shifts and pulls their cloak tighter. The animal exhales again. These small sources of warmth feel precious because they are safe. They do not threaten anyone else. They do not demand attention. There is an odd belief mentioned in some winter sermons that suffering cold purified intention. That enduring discomfort brought people closer to humility and patience. Whether those sermons reflected genuine belief or simply justified necessity is unclear. What matters is that they encouraged acceptance. Firelessness became virtue. You do not feel virtuous. You feel cold. But you also feel aware. You understand the logic. The church is a vessel, not just for people, but for history, for memory, for meaning. Burning it for one warm night would be unforgivable. You imagine the sound of fire inside this space, crackling, amplified by stone, smoke rising into darkness, panic echoing louder than bells. The image is enough to make you grateful for the cold again. Outside, fire could be built and extinguished without consequence. Inside, it lingered as a threat long after flames were gone. Charred beams weakened roofs. Smoke damaged paintings. Even small fires left scars. Cold left none. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of warmth you have found. Your body has learned to accept this trade. Safety over comfort. Endurance over relief. The candle continues to burn, controlled and distant. Its light is enough. Its warmth is irrelevant. You no longer expect heat from it. You only expect it not to betray you. Time moves slowly. The cold deepens, then steadies. Your body adapts as much as it can. Muscles stiffen, then settle. Breath remains visible. Life continues. You realize that fear plays a quiet role in keeping you alive tonight. Fear of fire keeps you still. Fear of movement keeps you curled. Fear of disturbance keeps you respectful of others. Fear becomes structure. And yet, this fear is not panicked. It is calm, familiar. It has been learned over generations. It whispers rather than shouts. It says endure, not flee. The animal shifts slightly, adjusting its position. Its body blocks a draft again. You feel a brief wave of relief. This is warmth you can trust. You close your eyes and focus on breath. Inhale, exhale. The night stretches on, but the danger remains contained. Cold surrounds you, but fire stays at bay. In this balance, harsh and careful, the night continues. Just when your body begins to settle into a fragile rhythm, sleep is interrupted again, not by cold this time, but by sound. A low movement of footsteps, the soft scrape of fabric, then a voice, quiet but firm, carried gently through the space. It is time. You do not need to understand the words to know what is happening. Night prayers, the hours that divide darkness into meaning. In many churches, winter did not cancel the rhythm of devotion. It tightened it. Cold or not, the prayers continued. You open your eyes slowly. Candlelight has shifted. More flames burn now, placed carefully along familiar paths. The shadows rearrange themselves across stone and column. The church feels different, more awake, even as bodies remain heavy with fatigue. Some people rise immediately. Their movements are practiced, economical. Others hesitate, unfolding stiff limbs with visible effort. You are among the slower ones. Standing feels like a negotiation between pain and balance. When you push yourself upright, the blood rushes back into places that had grown numb. Pins and needles flare, then fade. You pause, breathing through it. These prayers often came in the deepest part of the night, when warmth was lowest and exhaustion highest. Monastic communities followed strict schedules. Even in winter, lay people sheltering in the church were not always expected to participate fully, but they were expected to show respect, remaining silent, remaining still, remaining present. You sink into a kneeling position instead of standing fully. The stone bites immediately through fabric. You shift your weight back onto your heels. Minimizing contact. This posture is familiar to the building. Knees have pressed into this floor for centuries. Tonight, yours join them. The voices begin softly. Chant rather than speech. Simple tones that rise and fall slowly. Sound fills the space without urgency. The rhythm is steady, almost hypnotic. Cold fades slightly into the background as your attention shifts to listening. There is a strange effect to chanting in a cold space. Breath becomes controlled. Exhalations slow. The body warms slightly from the effort of sound. Not much, but enough to notice. Prayer becomes practical as well as spiritual. You feel your chest expand more fully as you follow the rhythm. Inhale with the phrase, exhale with the response. Even if you do not speak, your breathing aligns with the pattern. It steadies you. Somewhere nearby, the animal remains still. It does not react to the voices. It has likely heard them before. Churches were not silent places at night. They pulsed with routine. The prayers continue, measured and calm. Time stretches again, but differently now, marked by sound rather than sensation. Cold still presses in, but it does not dominate. Attention has shifted. There is evidence from church records that winter services were sometimes shortened or softened, recognizing the physical strain on bodies. Other records suggest no such mercy. Practice varied widely. Tonight, the service feels brief, but that may be exhaustion speaking. You glance around as discreetly as you can. Faces glow faintly in candlelight, eyes half closed, expressions neutral, focused inward. No one looks comfortable. No one looks surprised by that fact either. When the chanting ends, there is a pause. Silence returns. Heavier than before. The flames flicker. Someone moves to extinguish a few candles, leaving only what is necessary. Light retreats again. People begin to settle back into their places. The movement is careful, restrained. No one rushes. Rushing wastes heat. You lower yourself back down slowly, joints complaining, then quieting as you find your familiar curl. The interruption has changed something. Your body feels slightly warmer, not because temperature has risen, but because circulation has been stirred. Your mind feels calmer, focused. The cold remains, but it feels more manageable. You think briefly about how routine structured endurance. Winter nights were long, without markers. They could feel endless. Prayers broke the darkness into segments. They gave people something to lean on. For monks, this rhythm defined life. For travelers and the poor, it imposed order on chaos. Either way, it shaped how the night was experienced. You tuck your cloak again, reclaiming the position you had before. The animal nearby shifts slightly, then settles. Shared warmth returns. Sleep comes more easily now, though it remains shallow. The mind, soothed by rhythm, releases its grip slightly. Dreams flicker and fade. When you wake, the church feels unchanged, but you feel subtly different. Another hour passes, or two. Time is hard to measure now. Cold settles again, then stabilizes. Your body accepts it with less resistance. Exhaustion dulls sensation. You breathe slowly, matching the quiet around you. The night continues, marked now by memory of sound rather than its presence. The prayers linger, echoing faintly in your thoughts. This is how winter nights inside churches passed, not in uninterrupted rest, but in cycles. Cold, sound, stillness, adjustment, endurance. You curl inward again, conserving what little warmth remains. Dawn is still far away, but the night feels less endless than before. The stone holds you. The air moves quietly, and you wait, breathing, until the next shift comes. Time stops behaving the way you expect it to. Without daylight, without clocks, without constant movement, the night stretches and folds in on itself. Minutes feel long, hours blur. You stop trying to count them, because counting does nothing to make them pass faster. Instead, cold becomes your calendar. There is a point in the night when the temperature seems to drop another step. Subtle but unmistakable. You feel it first in your joints. Fingers stiffen more deeply. Ankles ache in a dull, internal way. Even your jaw tightens as if bracing. This is the coldest part of the night. The long, slow stretch before dawn, when warmth feels like a memory rather than a condition. People in the medieval world knew this moment well. Farmers, guards, monks, travelers. Anyone who stayed awake through winter nights recognized it. The air grows heavier. Breathing feels sharper. Even animals grow quieter. The world seems to hold its breath. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the fragile warmth you have built. The animal nearby exhales. A slow, steady sound. That helps. Shared warmth still exists, but it feels thinner now, stretched by the deepening cold. Your thoughts slow, not because you are falling asleep, but because thinking itself feels like work. Cold drains mental energy as surely as it drains physical warmth. You find yourself returning to the same small set of thoughts again and again. Breathe. Stay still. Wait. There is an odd effect that cold has on memory. It pulls your mind inward. You think less about the future, less about the past. Attention narrows to the present moment. Sensation replaces imagination. This narrowing is not peaceful exactly, but it is simple. You notice how sound changes again. The building seems quieter, as if even the stone has settled into stillness. Wind outside feels farther away. The creaks grow less frequent. Everything waits. This waiting has weight. It presses on your chest just as much as the cold presses on your limbs. You understand now why medieval writings often described winter nights as tests of patience. Endurance mattered more than action. There was nothing to do but remain. Your breathing remains slow and shallow. Each inhale feels colder than the last. You pull fabric closer around your mouth and nose, warming the air slightly before it enters your lungs. This small adjustment makes a noticeable difference. Tiny changes matter more now than they did earlier. Somewhere in the distance, a bell sounds faintly. Its tone is thinner than before. stretched by cold air. You do not know which hour it marks. It almost does not matter. What matters is that it marks change, proof that time has moved, even when it felt frozen. You feel a flicker of relief. The bell means dawn is closer, even if still far away. Medieval nights were often endured one signal at a time. Bells, prayers, shifts of cold. Each marker broke the night into survivable pieces. Your body begins to ache in new places. Muscles that had settled now complain quietly. Your lower back stiffens. Your neck protests. You resist the urge to move too much. Movement brings brief warmth, but it also invites deeper cold afterward. You choose stillness. The floor feels harder now than it did earlier. Or perhaps you simply feel it more. Sensation sharpens when sleep does not come. You press your cheek into your sleeve again, seeking any softness. It helps only slightly. You think about the people who did this night after night. Not once. Not as an experiment. As routine. As life. Winter did not arrive as a novelty. It arrived as a season to be managed. Endured. Survived. For monks, this cold was familiar. Their dormitories were often unheated. Their bedding minimal. The church was not much colder than where they usually slept. For travellers and the poor, this night might be worse than usual, but not entirely unfamiliar either. That realization changes how you feel about your discomfort. It becomes less dramatic, more ordinary. Cold is not attacking you. It is simply present. Your thoughts drift briefly to sunlight. Not warmth. Just light. Light means movement. Light means standing up without fear of slipping. Light means the night is over. You hold on to that idea without letting it grow into longing. Longing makes waiting harder. Nearby, someone stirs and resettles. You feel the shared warmth shift slightly. Then return. The animal exhales again. Slower now. Even it seems affected by the cold, though far less than you are. You wonder how much sleep you have actually had. Minutes here and there. Shallow dreams. Half-waking rest. Enough to keep you going. Perhaps. Not enough to feel restored. That was normal. Medieval sleep was often functional rather than refreshing. Cold nights trained bodies to rest when possible, not when ideal. People learned to take sleep in pieces. A few minutes here, a few minutes there. Over time, this became ordinary. You close your eyes again, not expecting sleep, but allowing it if it comes. Darkness feels heavier now, thicker somehow. Your mind floats near the surface of rest without sinking. There is a strange calm in this moment. The worst cold has arrived. You have not been overcome. You are still breathing, still here. There is nothing more to fear from the night itself. It has shown you what it can do. This realization brings a quiet steadiness. You stop bracing. You stop resisting quite so much. The cold does not leave, but it feels less aggressive once you stop fighting it. You draw one last breath through fabric. Slow and measured. You let your body remain curled. Compact. Efficient. You wait. Somewhere beyond the walls, the sky will eventually begin to lighten. You cannot see it. You cannot feel it yet. But it will happen. It always does. For now, you exist in the deepest part of the night, where time stretches thin and cold rules everything. You endure not through strength, but through patience. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the night begins to loosen its grip. Sleep, when it comes now, feels different from before. It is not a descent. It is more like a hovering. Your body does not let go completely. It cannot afford to. Instead, your mind drifts just far enough to blur the edges of sensation, then pulls back again. Cold shapes your dreams the way light shapes shadows. When your eyes close, the darkness behind them is not empty. Shapes form slowly, muted and colorless. Dreams here are thin, almost translucent. You dream of walking through corridors that stretch endlessly, of stone beneath your feet that never warms, of breath that hangs in the air no matter where you go. These dreams do not frighten you. They feel familiar, stitched from the night around you. You wake suddenly, heart beating a little faster. Unsure why, nothing has changed. The church remains still. The animal nearby exhales again. The cold has not deepened. Your body simply refused to sink any further. This happens again and again. Sleep arrives, retreats, returns in fragments. There is a reason for this. Deep sleep lowers body temperature. In warmth, that is safe. In cold, it is dangerous. Your body knows this, even if you do not think about it consciously. It keeps you close to waking, ready to move, ready to adjust. Survival overrides rest. You notice that when you do drift, your dreams carry physical sensations with them. You feel the pressure of stone even in sleep. You feel your knees drawn up. You feel fabric tight around your shoulders. The boundary between waking and dreaming becomes porous. One bleeds into the other. Some medieval writings describe dreams during winter as heavier, darker, more bodily. Whether this was metaphor or observation is hard to say. What you experience now supports the idea. Cold pulls dreams down into the body. They are not flights of imagination. They are echoes of sensation. You dream briefly of warmth, not fire, not sun, but movement, walking uphill, carrying something heavy, your muscles working, sweat forming under cloth. When you wake, the contrast is sharp. Stillness feels colder than before. You shift slightly, then settle again. Your joints complain softly. Ankles ache. Knees feel thick, resistant. Cold seeps into them and stays. You flex slowly, carefully, just enough to remind yourself they still respond. Pain flares, then dulls. You wait for it to pass before letting your eyes close again. Time moves strangely here. You cannot tell how long these cycles last. 5 minutes, 20, an hour, without markers. The mind loses its grip on sequence. Events float, disconnected. Sleep becomes a series of islands rather than a continuous shore. You become aware of the taste in your mouth. Dry, slightly metallic. Cold air dries everything. You swallow slowly, feeling the movement travel down your throat. There is no water to reach for. You accept the dryness as part of the night. The animal nearby shifts, hooves scraping softly. It resettles, perhaps responding to a change in temperature or discomfort of its own. Its warmth wavers for a moment, then returns. You feel relief that surprises you with its intensity. Even small comforts matter greatly now. You drift again. This time, the dream is quieter. You are standing in the same church, but it is empty. No one else is there. The space feels larger, colder. Your breath echoes loudly. When you wake, you realize the difference. In reality, you are not alone. The sounds of others are still present, even if faint. That knowledge steadies you. There is a moment when you forget where you are. Disorientation slips in quietly. You wake and do not immediately remember why you are on stone, why you are curled so tightly. Then sensation returns, and memory follows. Church, winter, night. The order restores itself. This disorientation was common in cold conditions. Confusion could creep in, especially for the old or ill. People learn to ground themselves quickly, touching fabric, listening for sound, repeating familiar words. You ground yourself by breathing slowly and feeling the floor beneath you. Your thoughts slow further, not fade. Slow. Each one takes effort. You stop forming complete sentences in your mind. Instead, impressions drift through. Cold, stone, breath, waiting. These become enough. You sense the beginning of fatigue on a deeper level now. not the sharp exhaustion of earlier hours, but a heavy weariness that settles into bones. It makes movement feel unnecessary. It makes acceptance easier. Somewhere far away, another bell sounds, very faint, almost imagined. It marks another passage of time, another small step toward morning. You do not try to calculate it. You simply let the sound exist. Sleep comes again, slightly deeper this time. Your muscles loosen just a fraction. Your breathing evens out. The cold does not retreat, but it no longer feels urgent. You are balanced on the edge between rest and readiness. In this state, dreams blur into sensation. You feel yourself falling slowly, not down, but inward. The church seems to fold around you. Stone, air, and body merge into one quiet experience. You are not separate from the night. You are inside it. When you wake again, there is no startle, just awareness returning. You open your eyes a little. The darkness looks the same. Candlelight still glows faintly at a distance. Nothing dramatic has changed. That, in itself, feels reassuring. You shift your weight slightly to ease pressure on one hip. The movement is slow and deliberate. Your body has learned caution. You resettle, curl inward again, and let your breath fall into a steady rhythm. This is how sleep works here. Not as escape, but as pause. Not as comfort, but as strategy. Each fragment of rest supports the next moment of endurance. You close your eyes once more. You do not demand sleep. You simply allow it to come and go as it will. The night is no longer something to conquer. It is something to move through. And so you hover there, between waking and dreaming, held in place by cold and patience, waiting for the first true change that will signal the night is finally loosening its hold. By now, the cold has stopped announcing itself loudly. It no longer shocks you when you shift or breathe. Instead, it settles into the body quietly, patiently, working inward. This is the kind of cold that does not demand attention but slowly changes how you feel, how you think, how you move. You notice it first in your strength. Small actions take more effort than they should. Lifting your head, flexing your fingers, even swallowing feels deliberate. The body conserves energy automatically, reducing movement to what is necessary. This is not weakness. It is adaptation. People in the medieval world understood this effect well, even if they explained it differently. Prolonged cold was known to drain vitality. Winter illnesses were common, especially after long nights like this one. Cold did not cause sickness directly, but it weakened the body's ability to resist it. Nights spent half frozen made the days that followed harder. You feel that vulnerability now, not as fear, but as awareness. Your body feels thinner somehow, as if its defenses have been stretched. You pull your cloak tighter again, not just for warmth, but for reassurance. Fabric becomes armor. Nearby, someone coughs softly, deeper than before. The sound lingers, then fades. You do not know them. You may never know what becomes of them. But the sound reminds you how fragile bodies are in winter. A cold night is not just discomfort. It is risk. There are old medical texts that describe winter as a season that thickens the humours, slowing the body and making it more susceptible to imbalance. The theory was flawed, but the observation was real. Cold, stiffened joints, slowed circulation, dulled appetite, and sapped strength. Nights like this accumulated quietly, their effects appearing days or weeks later. You notice your own throat feels raw, dried by cold air. Each breath scrapes slightly on the way in. You swallow again, hoping to ease it. There is no water to reach for. You accept the dryness and breathe through fabric to soften it. The animal nearby shifts again, and you feel warmth brush your side briefly. You hold on to that moment longer than you might have earlier in the night. Your body recognizes how precious it is now. Warmth is no longer comfort. It is protection. You think about how people prepared for winter nights knowing what they did to the body. Diets grew heavier when food allowed. Fats were valued. Broths were prized. Anything that helped the body hold heat mattered. Those who entered winter already weakened faced greater danger. Here, in the church, there is no food, no fire, only what you brought in your body and what you can borrow from others. The night strips life down to essentials. Your limbs feel heavier again. Muscles resist movement. This heaviness is not sleepiness. It is something else, a signal to remain still, to conserve. You listen to it. There is a moment when you wonder if standing and moving might help, if circulation might improve. Then you imagine the cold rushing in fully, the shock to exposed skin, the effort of regaining warmth afterward. You stay curled. Stillness wins again. Some medieval writers warned against sleeping too deeply in cold, fearing it could lead to sickness or worse. They advised light rest, frequent waking, gentle movement. Whether these warnings were widely followed is unclear. What is clear is that your body seems to follow similar rules on its own. You drift again, but lightly. Dreams now feel less like images and more like sensations. Weight, pressure, stillness. When you wake, the transition is smooth, almost unnoticeable. Waking and sleeping blend together. Your joints ache in a dull, persistent way. Knees, ankles, fingers. Cold seeps into places with less blood flow and lingers there. You flex slowly, carefully, testing movement. Everything responds. If, reluctantly, that is enough. You become aware of how the night has reshaped your sense of comfort. Earlier, you would have welcomed almost any change. Now, you resist it. Change costs energy. Familiar discomfort is easier to bear than unfamiliar adjustment. The church feels quieter now than at any point before. Even wind seems to have eased. This deep stillness carries its own weight. It is not peaceful, exactly, but it is stable. The night has reached a plateau. You listen again for bells. Nothing. Perhaps they will come later. Perhaps not. Time feels suspended here, as if the world is waiting with you. Your thoughts turn briefly to morning tasks. Standing, walking, using stiff limbs. You imagine the pain that will come with movement after so much stillness. The thought is unpleasant, but it also carries promise. Movement means daylight. Daylight means survival. There is a subtle change in the air that you almost miss. It feels slightly less sharp, slightly less biting. This is not warmth. It is simply the absence of further cooling. The temperature has stopped falling. That realization brings quiet relief. The worst of the cold has passed. The night may not be over, but it has shown you its hardest face. You have endured it. Nearby, someone shifts and groans softly, then settles again. Bodies respond to this change too, even if unconsciously. There is less tension now, less bracing. You draw one slow breath, then another. The air still hurts, but less than before. Your body begins to loosen its grip just a fraction. Muscles relax slightly. The effort of holding tight eases. This is the moment when illness and endurance diverge. Those who can hold on through this phase often recover with daylight. Those already weakened may not. Winter nights sorted bodies quietly. Without ceremony, you feel tired, but not fading. That distinction matters. Fatigue is manageable. Fading is dangerous. You are still present, still aware, still breathing steadily. You let your eyes close again, not forcing sleep, simply allowing rest to hover. Your body remains curled, compact, efficient. Warmth from the animal lingers faintly. Shared air still helps. Somewhere beyond the walls, the sky is changing, even if you cannot see it. The cold knows this too. It has done what it can. Now it waits. You remain there, balanced between discomfort and relief. knowing that the night has begun its slow retreat. As the night loosens its grip, something else begins to take its place. It is not warmth. Not yet. It is meaning. When the body has been pushed close to its limits, the mind looks for something to hold on to. Inside a medieval church, that something was often faith, whether quiet, practiced, or improvised in the dark. You are not thinking in formal prayers now. Words feel heavy. Instead, belief settles into you the way breath does. Slowly and without effort. The space itself encourages it. Stone walls rise around you, unchanged for generations. Candles still burn where they always have. Ritual has passed through this place so many times that it feels embedded in the air. Cold sharpens this awareness. When comfort disappears, attention turns inward. Many people believed that hardship stripped away distraction, leaving only what truly mattered. Whether that belief was comforting or simply necessary is difficult to separate. What you feel now is a quiet focus, a narrowing of thought toward endurance and meaning. You think about how churches were meant to feel timeless. Outside, seasons shifted. Crops grew and failed. People came and went. Inside, the structure remained. Sleeping here placed you inside something larger than your own discomfort. That perspective mattered. It made suffering feel shared, not isolated. Some people whispered prayers during nights like this. Others simply listened to the building, believing its stillness carried protection. Faith did not always look dramatic. Often it was just patience framed as purpose. You become aware of how your breathing has changed again. Slower now, deeper. The tension in your chest has eased slightly. Accepting the cold rather than fighting it seems to reduce its hold on you. This acceptance is not resignation. It is adaptation shaped by belief. In winter sermons, cold was sometimes described as a teacher. It taught humility, restraint, awareness of dependence on forces beyond human control. While such language might sound comforting from a pulpit, lying here on stone, it takes on a different tone. Cold teaches because it must. You learn because you have no choice. You think briefly of the people who built this church. They worked through winters too. Hands numb, breath visible, stone biting into skin. Their labor created this shelter. Their endurance echoes in yours. The connection feels real, not abstract. Faith also offered explanations when physical understanding fell short. Cold was seen as trial, purification, reminder of mortality. These interpretations did not remove pain, but they gave it context. Pain without context feels endless. Pain with meaning feels survivable. You feel your body relax a fraction more. Muscles unclench slightly. The animal nearby shifts again, then stills. Shared warmth remains faint but steady. You are no longer alone inside your own endurance. There is a quiet rhythm to this moment. Breath, stillness, awareness. You are not actively praying, but you are present. That presence itself feels intentional, almost ritualistic. You think about how many people have passed nights like this inside churches. Refugees from storms, pilgrims too poor to afford inns, locals whose homes offered less protection than stone walls. Each carried their own reasons, their own beliefs, their own fears. Yet the experience of cold bound them together. Some believed that sleeping inside a church offered protection beyond physical shelter. Evil was thought to avoid sacred ground. Night carried dangers unseen. Being here meant safety of a different kind. Whether those dangers were real mattered less than the comfort the belief provided. You listen again to the building. It is quiet now. No footsteps, no prayers, just breath and distant wind. The silence feels different than before, less tense, more settled. Your thoughts slow further, but they do not disappear. They turn reflective. You consider how hardship reshapes priorities. Comfort becomes secondary. Meaning moves forward. Endurance becomes a value in itself. There is a sense of gratitude that surfaces quietly. Not for the cold, but for surviving it so far. For the shelter, for the animal's warmth, for the shared presence of others. Gratitude does not require abundance. Sometimes it grows strongest where there is least. You close your eyes again and let your breathing fall into a steady pattern. Inhale through fabric. Exhale slowly. Each breath feels intentional, as if chosen rather than automatic. This awareness brings calm. The church holds you in its stillness. Its stone does not warm, but it does not move either. Stability matters when everything else feels uncertain. You think briefly of daylight again, not as rescue, but as continuation. Morning will bring stiffness, hunger, fatigue. It will also bring light, movement, and possibility. Faith stretches forward as well as inward. Your body feels heavy now, but not threatened. Cold remains, but its sharp edge has dulled. You sense that the worst has passed. What remains is waiting. In this waiting, belief does quiet work. It reframes discomfort. It connects you to something larger. It gives the night shape beyond sensation. You let yourself rest in that frame, not analyzing it, simply experiencing it. The cold does not leave, but it feels less personal. It becomes part of the world rather than an enemy directed at you. You remain curled, breathing steadily, eyes closed. The night continues to soften. Faith does not warm your body, but it steadies your mind. That steadiness helps you endure the last stretch before dawn. And so you wait, held by stone and belief alike, knowing that meaning, like warmth, sometimes comes not from outside, but from how you hold yourself within the cold. As the hours thin out toward morning, differences begin to show. Not everyone experiences this night the same way, even lying on the same stone floor, under the same roof. The cold touches people unevenly. You start to notice it now, in small details that stand out more clearly as exhaustion sharpens your awareness. Some bodies are better protected than others. A thicker cloak, better shoes, an extra layer folded beneath a hip. These details matter more than titles or names. Yet they often follow lines of status. Wealth, even modest wealth, changes how winter feels. You glance toward the far side of the church. In a shadowed corner near the chancel, someone lies on a folded bundle that looks suspiciously like bedding. Not much, just enough to lift them slightly off the stone. That elevation alone makes a difference. Cold air pools low. Being raised even a hand's breadth reduces its bite. You do not feel anger. Not really. More a quiet recognition. Social differences did not disappear at night. They softened, but they remained. The church gathered everyone together, but it did not make them equal. Clergy often had privileges, even in hardship. A stall, a bench, a place closer to walls hung with cloth. These were not luxuries by modern standards, but they mattered here. Sitting or sleeping against wood rather than stone preserved warmth. Proximity to familiar corners reduced drafts. Small advantages accumulated. You think about how class expressed itself through posture. Those used to sleeping on floors adapted faster. Those accustomed to bed struggled more at first. Habit shaped endurance as much as clothing did. Poverty, in a strange way, trained the body for nights like this. You notice that some people rise more easily during the brief moments of movement. Their joints seem less stiff. Their hands respond faster. Better nutrition shows itself now. Fats stored under skin offer insulation. Stronger bodies resist cold longer. Winter revealed these differences without mercy. At the same time, hardship blurs boundaries. The wealthy person with a thin cloak suffers more than the poor person with practical wool. Experience matters. Knowledge matters. Knowing how to tuck fabric, how to block drafts, how to stay still. These skills are not taught in books. They are learned through repetition. You adjust your own position again, not out of discomfort, but out of awareness. You have learned much through this night. You know where warmth gathers. You know which movements cost too much. You know how to wait. There is a moment when someone passes quietly nearby. Perhaps a church attendant checking candles. Perhaps someone repositioning themselves. Their footsteps are careful. You feel a brief rush of colder air as they move. Then it settles again. Even movement reflects status. Those who move with purpose conserve energy. Those who fidget lose it. You think about how medieval society accepted these differences as natural. Inequality was expected. Winter did not challenge that belief. It reinforced it. Some survived more comfortably than others. Some endured with less. Yet the church still gathered everyone together. For this night, everyone shared the same cold air, the same stone floor, the same waiting. Differences existed within that shared experience, not outside it. You feel your own body respond to this realization with calm rather than resentment. There is no point in comparison now. Survival is personal. Endurance is individual. You focus inward again. Your breathing remains steady. The animal nearby shifts slightly, then settles. That warmth does not belong to anyone. It is simply there, available to whoever positions themselves wisely. In that sense, nature offers its own quiet balance. You recall stories of people sleeping in churches during winter epidemics or famines. Status mattered less then. Crowding increased. Warmth was shared more openly. Extreme hardship flattened hierarchies temporarily. Tonight is not that extreme, but you can sense how easily it could become so. Your thoughts drift to morning rituals. Who will rise first? Who will move stiffly? Who will leave quickly? Eager for work or travel? Who will linger? Recovering slowly. Class shapes the morning too. The cold has taught you patience. It has also taught you observation. You notice details you would ignore in comfort. How someone's shoes are wrapped with extra cloth. How another uses a satchel as a pillow. How one person curls tightly while another sits upright, conserving heat differently. These choices reflect lives lived long before this night. Habits formed over years. Winter simply reveals them. You settle again into stillness, content with what you have learned. There is no envy in you now, only understanding. This night has been an education in quiet ways. The church remains unchanged. Stone arches hold steady. Candlelight flickers faintly. Breath continues to cloud the air. Within this space, differences exist. But endurance connects everyone. You close your eyes again, letting the lesson fade into the background. Dawn is closer now. You can feel it in the slight easing of the air, in the way your body no longer braces as tightly. The night has not defeated you. It has shown you how the world works. And soon, when light returns, these differences will scatter again into daily life. For now, you remain here, equal in cold, unequal in comfort, enduring together inside the same ancient walls. Light arrives before warmth. You sense it long before you see it clearly. The air changes first, not in temperature, but in texture. It feels slightly thinner, less oppressive. The darkness that pressed so close all night begins to loosen, retreating into corners and high spaces. You open your eyes and notice that the black has softened into deep grey. Somewhere above, a window admits the faintest hint of morning. Not a beam, not a glow, just a suggestion that night is no longer absolute. This change feels profound after hours of sameness. It is subtle, but it shifts everything. Your body responds immediately. Muscles tense, then prepare to move. After so long curled inward, the idea of standing feels both welcome and threatening. You know it will hurt. You also know you must do it. Around you, others begin to stir. The soundscape changes. Cloth rustles more frequently. Someone exhales sharply as they stretch. Another groans softly, then laughs under their breath at their own stiffness. These sounds feel lighter than those of the night, less guarded, less afraid of wasting energy. You sit up slowly, careful not to rush blood back into numb limbs too quickly. Your head spins for a moment. You pause, breathing steadily until it settles. When you place your hands on the floor to push yourself upright, the stone feels just as cold as before. Light has not warmed it at all. Still, seeing it makes the cold easier to bear. Standing is an effort. Your legs protest immediately. Joints stiff and uncooperative. You straighten slowly, vertebra by vertebra, feeling each movement echo through your body. Pain flares, sharp and immediate, then dulls as circulation returns. You grip your cloak tighter, not for warmth, but for balance. Morning light reveals faces you barely noticed in the dark. Pale skin, red noses, eyes rimmed with fatigue. Everyone looks older than they did last evening. Winter nights leave marks quickly. The animal nearby rises as well, shaking itself lightly. Its movement sends a faint wave of warmer air toward you. Then it steps away, unconcerned. Its role in the night is over. It will return to its own routine now, leaving you with what remains. You look around the church with new eyes. Details emerge. Carvings on columns, worn edges on steps, wax drips hardened into irregular shapes. Morning reveals the evidence of use. This place has held countless nights like this one. It shows. Someone moves to open a door. Cold air rushes in briefly, sharper than what has lingered inside. Snow light reflects off the ground outside, brightening the interior more quickly than the sun itself. The contrast stings your eyes. You realize that while the night is ending, winter is not. This church will remain cold all day. Stone does not warm easily. Daylight brings visibility, not comfort. People begin to gather their belongings. Small bundles, cloaks folded with care, sacks slung over shoulders. Movements are slow and deliberate. No one rushes. Rushing wastes energy, and energy feels precious after a night like this. You take a few careful steps, testing your legs. Each step sends a dull ache upward, but movement loosens stiffness. Blood flows more freely now. Warmth follows slowly, generated by effort rather than environment. There is a quiet relief in being upright, in having gravity work with you rather than against you. Sitting and lying exposed you fully to cold. Standing gives you agency again. Morning prayers may follow, or not. Practices varied. Some people remain for a brief service. Others slip out quietly, eager to move, to work, to find food. Survival does not always allow time for ritual. You consider leaving, then hesitate. The church still offers shelter from wind. Outside is brighter, but colder in a different way. Snow reflects light harshly. Wind cuts more freely. You weigh the options instinctively. Hunger announces itself now that cold has eased its grip slightly. Your stomach tightens. Food would help restore warmth and strength. That thought pulls you toward movement, toward the day. You adjust your cloak one last time, then let it hang more loosely. The fabric feels less stiff as your body warms. You flex your fingers again. Sensation has returned fully. That feels like victory. Around you, people exchange brief glances, nods, no long conversations. Words feel unnecessary. Shared endurance has already said enough. You step closer to the doorway, letting light fall fully across your face. It feels almost shocking after so many hours of dimness. You squint, then adjust. The world outside looks larger, sharper, more demanding. As you cross the threshold, cold meets you again. But it feels different now. Daytime cold can be managed. It does not trap you in stillness. You can walk. You can work. You can generate heat through movement. You glance back once at the interior. The church looks unchanged. Calm. Solid. It has done its job. It has sheltered you through the worst part of the night. It does not promise more than that. Stepping fully outside, you draw a deeper breath. The air burns slightly, then clears. Your lungs adapt quickly. The sky above is pale, washed with early light. No sun yet, but promise of it. The night lingers in your body. Stiffness, fatigue, a deep weariness that will not disappear quickly. But you are upright. You are moving. That matters. As you walk away, the church recedes behind you, returning to its role as landmark rather than shelter. Another night will come, another winter evening. For now, this one is over. Morning has arrived without warmth, but with enough light to carry you forward. Movement becomes your first real source of warmth. Each step sends a dull ache through your legs, but it also wakes them. Blood flows more freely now, carrying heat back into places that had gone quiet overnight. The pain is sharp at first, then settles into something manageable. You welcome it. Pain means sensation. Sensation means life returning to your limbs. The ground outside the church crunches faintly beneath your feet. Frost clings to everything. Grass, stone, wood. Morning has arrived, but winter still rules the landscape. Light reveals how cold the world truly is. Snow that looked soft in darkness now glitters hard and bright. Shadows sharpen rather than soften. You adjust your cloak again, not to block cold, but to allow movement. Fabric that felt stiff during the night loosens as your body warms. Wool creases unfold. Linen shifts more easily. Clothing responds to motion, the way it never responded to stillness. Your breath no longer clouds as heavily as before. It still shows, but the clouds are thinner, quicker to fade. That change brings quiet relief. The worst cold is behind you. Even if the temperature has not risen much, daytime cold feels different because you are no longer trapped within it. You stretch your arms carefully as you walk, testing joints that spent the night curled tight. Shoulders protest. Fingers resist straightening. You flex them slowly, feeling sensation return fully. Stiffness eases inch by inch. Around you, others move in similar ways. Some walk quickly, eager to generate warmth. Others shuffle, conserving energy. Each body carries the night differently. You notice how posture reveals experience. Those used to winter move with patience. Those less accustomed seem frustrated by their own slowness. You pass a few people who slept inside the church as well. Brief glances are exchanged. No words are needed. Shared experience lingers quietly between you. It does not require acknowledgement. The smell of morning is sharp. Cold earth. Smoke from distant hearths just beginning to stir. The promise of food carries faintly on the air. That promise pulls you forward. Hunger feels clearer now that cold has loosened its grip. You think about what comes next. Work. Travel. Waiting. Winter does not pause for recovery. Nights like this are folded into daily life without ceremony. You will carry the fatigue with you, working around it rather than eliminating it. There is an awareness now of how cold lingers inside the body even after exposure ends. Muscles remain tight. Joints remain sensitive. The night leaves its mark quietly, to be felt later when effort catches up with you. Some people believed that movement after a cold night was dangerous, that warming too quickly could cause illness. Others believed the opposite, that movement was essential to restore balance. Practices varied. What mattered most was listening to the body. You move steadily, not rushing, not freezing. The world feels louder in daylight. Birds call weakly from bare branches. Wind carries sound farther now. The crunch of footsteps feels sharp against the quiet morning. Each sound reminds you that life has resumed. You glance back once more toward the church. In daylight, it looks different, less mysterious, more solid. A building rather than a presence. Stone walls stand firm, unchanged by the night you spent inside them. The church does not remember discomfort the way you do. It simply stands. This difference feels important. People pass through hardship. Buildings endure it without sensation. Sleeping inside those walls connected you briefly to something larger and indifferent. Leaving them reminds you that you are separate again. As you walk farther away, warmth builds slowly through effort. Your breath deepens. Muscles respond more readily. The ache in your joints fades to a background hum. Cold still nips at exposed skin, but it no longer dominates your awareness. You notice how your thoughts expand again. During the night, they narrowed to sensation and waiting. Now they widen to include plans, responsibilities, and choices. Mental space returns alongside physical movement. Hunger sharpens further. You imagine warm broth, bread, anything heavy enough to settle in your stomach and feed the heat your body is generating. Food and fire become priorities again. Winter mornings taught people efficiency. There was little room for delay. Heat came from action. Standing still meant losing what warmth you had gained. You keep moving. You pass fields lying dormant under frost. Tools rest unused for now. Winter reshapes labor as much as sleep. Tasks slow. Daylight shortens. Everything compresses inward. There is a quiet satisfaction in having endured the night. It does not feel triumphant. It feels practical. Another night survived. Another morning reached. This rhythm defined winter life more than any single hardship. You feel a deeper respect now for the people who lived this way, season after season. Sleeping cold. Waking stiff. Working anyway. Comfort was rare. Endurance was routine. As your body continues to warm, the memory of the night begins to soften. Sensations dull. Sharp edges fade. By midday, this night will feel distant, like a story rather than an experience. The body protects itself that way. For now, though, the memory remains vivid. Stone, breath, darkness, waiting. Those details stay with you as you move forward into the day. You draw one more steady breath of cold morning air and keep walking. Winter has not ended, but this night has, and that is enough to carry you into whatever comes next. Even as the day unfolds, the night stays with you. Cold does not leave the body all at once. It lingers quietly in joints, in muscles, in the slow stiffness that returns whenever you pause too long. You feel it when you stop walking, when you sit, when you stand still and let the wind reach you again. The night inside the church has marked you in ways that daylight cannot erase. You notice it most when movement slows. Each time you rest, the chill creeps back, reminding you how much warmth now depends on effort. Medieval winters trained people to distrust stillness. Rest was necessary, but it came with consequences. Warmth had to be earned repeatedly. Your hands ache slightly as you flex them. Fingers that felt numb hours ago now throb with returning sensation. The ache is uncomfortable, but it is also reassuring. It means blood is flowing. It means your body is reclaiming itself. You think about how this lingering, cold-shaped daily life. Tasks were chosen with care. Work that kept the body moving was favored. Long pauses were avoided when possible. Even conversation happened while walking or working, just to keep warmth circulating. For those who slept cold regularly, this was familiar. The body learned to expect stiffness in the morning. It learned to work through it. There was no concept of waiting to feel better before beginning the day. Feeling better came after beginning. You notice that your posture has changed slightly. Shoulders remain hunched, guarding heat. Chin stays tucked instinctively. These habits will fade later, but for now they feel necessary. The body does not trust the day yet. As you move through the morning, you catch glimpses of others who endured the same night. Their movements mirror yours. Slow stretches, careful steps, occasional pauses to ease discomfort. No one complains. Complaints do not warm the body. You pass a small group gathered around a modest fire outside a dwelling. Smoke rises thinly into the cold air. People stand close, hands extended, faces turned toward warmth. Fire is allowed here. Encouraged. Its heat feels almost overwhelming after the restraint of the church. You feel the pull of it strongly. You stop briefly, letting warmth soak into your palms. The sensation is intense, almost painful at first. Blood rushes back into chilled skin, bringing pins and needles. You breathe through it until the pain softens into relief. This is what you have been missing all night. Yet even here, fire is used carefully. Fuel is precious. Flames are kept small. People do not waste heat. Winter teaches restraint everywhere, not just inside sacred walls. As you move on, you realize how different warmth feels now, not like comfort, but like repair. It mends what cold strained. Muscles loosen, breath deepens, thought becomes easier. You think back to the church and how warmth was rationed there by necessity and fear. Outside, warmth is still precious, but it feels more accessible. The contrast sharpens your memory of the night. There is a subtle shift in how you relate to the world now. After enduring cold, small comforts carry more weight. A warm surface, a sheltered corner, a shared fire. These things feel generous rather than ordinary. You reflect on how medieval people measured hardship differently. There were no temperature readings, no forecasts. Cold was understood through sensation and consequence. Nights like the one you survived were benchmarks. If you endured them, you knew what you could withstand. This knowledge carried forward. It shaped decisions about travel, work, and shelter. It informed when people took risks and when they waited. Winter was not just a season. It was a test repeated daily. Your body continues to warm as the morning progresses. Movement has done its work. The stiffness eases. The ache fades into background awareness. Cold still exists, but it no longer dominates. You feel hunger again. Stronger now. Food will be the next step in recovery. Warm food, if available, will restore strength more quickly than movement alone. Medieval diets leaned heavily on what could be preserved through winter. Bread, porridge, broth. Fat mattered. Calories mattered. Warmth depended on them. You imagine how people planned for nights like the one you endured. Extra layers saved for sleep. Cloaks kept close. Knowledge passed quietly through families about how to endure. This planning was invisible when it worked. Its absence was felt sharply when it did not. As the sun climbs slightly higher, light grows clearer. Shadows shorten. The world looks less hostile. Even though the air remains cold, visibility changes how cold feels. It feels manageable when you can see where you are going. You realize that the night inside the church has altered how you perceive safety. Shelter is no longer defined by walls alone. It is defined by how those walls behave in winter. Thick stone protected you from wind and snow, but it also held cold relentlessly. Safety came with cost. This understanding deepens your respect for the choices people made. Choosing to sleep inside a church during winter was not romantic. It was pragmatic. It traded one danger for another, wind and exposure for cold and discomfort. Survival often meant choosing the least harmful option. You carry that lesson forward as the day unfolds. Winter does not allow perfect solutions. It demands compromise. Your steps grow steadier now. Warmth generated by movement settles into your core. Your breathing deepens fully. The night recedes further into memory. And yet, part of you knows it will return. Another night will come. Another evening of cold, darkness, and waiting. The knowledge does not frighten you. It feels familiar now. You know what it asks of you. You have learned how to curl inward, how to breathe steadily, how to share warmth without words, how to wait without panic. These skills remain with you. As midday approaches, the cold night inside the church becomes a quiet reference point, a reminder of what winter requires, a measure of endurance. You move forward into the day carrying that knowledge in your body, ready to use it again when the light fades and the cold returns. As the day continues, understanding settles in more clearly. The cold you endured was not an accident. It was not neglect. It was design. Churches were never meant to be warm. They were meant to last. You think back to the walls you leaned against during the night. Thick, immovable, built to resist time rather than temperature. Stone was chosen for permanence, not comfort. It stood against storms, against fire from outside, against war. In doing so, it also resisted warmth. What protected the building worked against the body. Churches were raised to point upward, drawing eyes, voices, and thoughts toward the sky. High ceilings created awe. Tall windows lifted attention away from the ground. That vertical ambition mattered more than heat. Warm air rose and disappeared into darkness above, leaving the floor cold and unchanged. This was understood, even if it was not spoken openly. People did not expect churches to feel like homes. Homes, even poor ones, clustered low, held heat close, trapped smoke and warmth around bodies. Churches opened themselves to space. They breathed. They echoed. They refused to hold on to anything for long. You realize now that sleeping inside a church during winter was always meant to be temporary. It was shelter, not refuge. Protection from wind and snow, not from cold itself. People knew this when they entered. They accepted it as part of the exchange. The materials tell the story. Stone floors instead of wood, bare walls instead of layered ones, windows placed high, often unglazed or thinly covered. These choices made sense for light and durability. They made little sense for warmth. In some regions, attempts were made to soften this. Wooden screens, hanging cloth, tapestries along walls. These reduced drafts and improved acoustics. Their effect on temperature was limited, but noticeable. Even so, they were never enough to turn a church into a warm place. You think about how rarely heating was considered essential in sacred architecture. Fire belonged to the hearth, not the altar. Warmth was domestic. Worship demanded separation from bodily comfort. This separation was not always cruel. It was philosophical. Cold reinforced reverence. When the body was uncomfortable, the mind became alert. Stillness carried weight. Discomfort, discouraged, lingering for reasons other than devotion or necessity. Churches were not meant to invite lounging. They were meant to focus attention. That focus mattered in a world without constant distraction. Cold kept people awake during long services. It kept them aware of posture, of breath, of presence. Even sleep inside these walls demanded restraint. You begin to see the night not as failure of shelter, but as fulfillment of purpose. The church did exactly what it was built to do. It stood. It protected. It did not indulge. This realization shifts how you remember the cold. It becomes less personal, less hostile. It was not aimed at you. It was a consequence of choices made long before you arrived. Choices rooted in belief and necessity. Medieval builders did not have insulation as a concept. They worked with what they had. Stone, wood, lime. They knew cold existed. They accepted it. Their priority was survival of the structure across centuries, not comfort of bodies for a single night. And they succeeded. The church remains. You pass through it. The night ended. The building endured. You think about how modern spaces reverse these priorities. Buildings now trap heat, seal air, center comfort. They change environment to suit the body. In the medieval world, the body adapted to environment instead. This difference feels stark now that you have lived it. Even briefly, the night taught you how much effort goes into modern warmth, how artificial it is. Warmth does not exist by default. It is created. Inside the church, warmth could not be created safely, so it was not pursued. Endurance replaced comfort. Knowledge replaced expectation. You recall how drafts moved through the space, how the floor never warmed, how breath remained visible until morning. None of this was accidental. It was structural. Some scholars suggest that this cold reinforced the idea that the church was not meant for the body, but for the soul. Others argue that this interpretation came later, imposed on practical realities. The truth likely sits between belief and necessity shaped each other. What you know now is simple. The cold was real. The stone was real. The experience was shared by countless others before you. As the day progresses, this understanding settles deeper. It becomes part of how you interpret the memory. The night stops feeling like an ordeal and starts feeling like a lesson. You think about future winters, about how people planned around cold spaces like this, about how they learned which buildings offered which kinds of protection, about how knowledge passed quietly, without instruction manuals or measurements. Churches were known quantities. Everyone understood what they offered and what they did not. Entering one for the night was a calculated choice, not a hopeful gamble. This clarity feels grounding. It replaces frustration with acceptance. You endured exactly what was expected. The cold inside the church did not mean neglect or cruelty. It meant priorities aligned with values of the time. Durability, reverence, community, shelter from chaos rather than comfort from cold. You carry this understanding forward as the day continues. It changes how you see the building when you pass it again, not as inhospitable, but as honest. The stone does not pretend to care about your warmth. It cares about standing. And in standing, it offers what it can. By afternoon, your body has mostly recovered. Movement has restored warmth. Food has helped. The night feels farther away now. But the lesson remains clear. Sleeping inside a medieval church during the coldest winter nights was never meant to be gentle. It was meant to be possible. That distinction mattered. You survived because the building did its job and because you adapted to its nature. Neither could have done it alone. As evening approaches again, the memory sharpens briefly. Another night will come. Another decision will be made. Where to sleep. How to endure. You are better prepared now. You understand the structure. You understand yourself. And you understand why the church remained cold. And why that cold was never truly the enemy. As evening approaches again, the light softens and the world begins to fold inward. Shadows lengthen. Movement slows. You feel the day's warmth, hard-earned through effort and motion, beginning to slip away. The cold you pushed aside does not rush back. It waits. Winter is patient. This is when memory does its quiet work. The night inside the church no longer feels distant. It rises gently in your awareness. Not as discomfort, but as preparation. You know what is coming. Darkness, stillness, the slow narrowing of options. The body remembers before the mind does. You notice how people around you adjust as daylight fades. Cloaks are drawn tighter. Paths shorten. Conversations end earlier. Evening in winter is not leisurely. It is deliberate. Everyone moves with an understanding that warmth must be conserved now, not wasted. You consider where you will sleep tonight. The question carries weight. Choices are evaluated differently after experience. A place that looks solid in daylight may feel unforgiving after sunset. A place that felt adequate once may now feel risky. The church stands where it always has. Its stone walls glow faintly in the last light. It remains an option. You know exactly what it offers. Shelter from wind and snow. A roof. A familiar cold. No surprises. That familiarity matters. Unknown cold is frightening. Known cold can be planned for. You understand how to position yourself now. Where drafts run. How the floor behaves. How to use shared warmth without words. The church has become a known quantity. You think about how medieval people made these decisions nightly through winter. Not once. Not as an experiment. As routine. The season demanded constant evaluation. Where is safest? Where is least harmful? Where can I endure until morning? This process shaped instincts. It trained awareness. Winter sharpened judgment because mistakes were costly. You notice how your body reacts to the idea of stillness again. Muscles tighten slightly. Shoulders draw inward. Your posture shifts before you choose it. Experience has left its mark. As darkness deepens, you become more attentive to small comforts. A sheltered corner, a wall that blocks wind, a surface that feels less cold underhand. These details mattered then as they matter now. You reflect on how modern nights differ. Electric light, central heat, soft surfaces. These remove the need for such awareness. Comfort dulls instincts. The medieval night demanded attention. It trained people to read their environment closely. This awareness extended beyond sleep. It influenced how buildings were used, how spaces were shared, how people gathered. Winter compressed life inward, forcing cooperation and restraint. You recall how the church gathered strangers together without ceremony. No introductions, no explanations. Shared endurance replaced social ritual. That temporary community dissolved with daylight, but it served its purpose. There is a quiet respect in this system. It does not promise comfort. It offers possibility. It gives you a chance to endure. Nothing more. You weigh your options again. The sky darkens. Wind picks up slightly. Snow threatens. Carried faintly in the air. Exposure will be dangerous tonight. A roof matters. The church remains where it is. Unchanged. You know its cost now. You know its limits. That knowledge makes the choice clearer. You imagine entering again. The door heavy in your hand. The first breath of cold air. The familiar smell of stone and wax. None of this surprises you now. Familiar hardship is easier to face than imagined comfort. You think about how knowledge passed this way through generations. Not written, not formal, experienced, shared indirectly. Children learned by watching adults prepare, by seeing how they folded cloaks, chose corners, settled bodies. Winter nights were teachers, harsh ones, effective ones. You feel a strange sense of readiness now. Not eagerness, readiness. The body accepts what it must do. Resistance fades. Preparation replaces fear. As you move toward shelter, you adjust your clothing deliberately. Layers aligned. Openings closed. Fabric arranged to anchor warmth. These actions feel calm. Practiced. The day's experiences have reshaped how you approach the night. You are not hoping for comfort. You are planning for endurance. That shift makes all the difference. The church door comes into view again. Stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use. You pause briefly before entering, letting the last light touch your face. The air is already colder here, shadowed by walls. You step inside. The sound changes immediately. Outside noise fades. Inside, space opens. Cold greets you without hostility. It is simply present. As before, you move with purpose now. You know where drafts run. You know where the floor slopes. You know where others will likely gather. Experience guides your steps. The night ahead will not be easy, but it will not be unknown. That knowledge steadies you. You settle into position earlier than before the deepest cold arrives. You tuck fabric carefully. You choose stillness sooner. Preparation saves energy. As darkness completes its hold, you feel less anxious than you did the night before. The church feels less overwhelming. The cold feels less personal. You breathe slowly, letting awareness replace tension. You are not fighting the night now. You are entering it with understanding. This is what winter demanded of people then. Not courage in the dramatic sense, but familiarity with discomfort. A willingness to adapt rather than resist. You allow yourself to rest into that understanding. The night stretches ahead, but you are not unprepared. Stone surrounds you. Breath clouds the air. Darkness settles gently. And you remain. Calm. Attentive. Ready to endure once more. Night settles again. Fully this time. There is no hesitation in it now. Darkness fills the church with practiced ease, finding every corner, every curve of stone. You are already in place, already curled inward, already prepared. The difference this time is subtle but real. You know what to expect. Cold arrives without drama. It presses in gradually, the way it always does. First, the air sharpens. Then the stone beneath you begins its quiet work, drawing warmth downward and away. You adjust your cloak once, then leave it. Too much movement wastes energy. You let the cold announce itself and then move past it. Your breathing steadies early. Inhale through fabric. Exhale slowly. You do not rush this rhythm. You learned last night that breath is both anchor and guide. When it stays calm, everything else follows. Around you, the church fills again with familiar sounds. A cough here, cloth shifting there, someone settling against a column. The animal is back as well, its presence marked by smell and the soft weight of its breathing. The night rebuilds its small community without ceremony. You feel the difference in your body now, not less cold, but less resistance. Muscles relax sooner. Your posture finds its shape more quickly. The tension that once came from uncertainty is gone. Experience has replaced it. You notice how your thoughts behave differently too. They do not race. They do not argue with sensation. They acknowledge it and move on. Cold is information now, not alarm. The candlelight flickers faintly at a distance. You do not watch it as closely as before. You trust it to do its job without demanding attention. Trust is another thing you gained through endurance. Time passes, though you no longer try to measure it. You recognize shifts instead. The deepening of cold, the softening of sound, the moment when stillness becomes complete enough that even the building seems to pause. Sleep arrives in fragments again, but you accept them easily now. When you wake, you adjust only if necessary. When you drift, you allow it. The cycle feels familiar, almost routine. You think briefly about how many nights like this shaped lives long ago. Not one memorable night, but hundreds. Winter was not a story. It was a condition. People learned to live within it rather than defeat it. The church remains unchanged. Stone absorbs nothing from you. It offers nothing more than before. Yet the relationship has shifted. You are no longer asking it to be something else. You meet it on its own terms. As the cold reaches its deepest point again, you recognize it immediately. Joints stiffen, breath sharpens, awareness narrows. But there is no surprise this time. You curl slightly tighter. Anchor fabric. And wait. Waiting no longer feels empty. It feels purposeful. This is the last stretch. You have done this before. Eventually, without announcement, the cold stops deepening. The air steadies. The worst has passed. You feel it in the subtle way your body loosens its grip. Not warmth, just relief. Dawn will come again. Light before heat. Movement before comfort. You know the sequence now. Knowing makes it easier. You remain still, breathing steadily, letting rest come and go. The night does not feel endless anymore. It feels finite. And as you hover there, between darkness and morning, between cold and recovery, the experience settles into something complete. You endured. You adapted. You learned.